Welcome back to Mr. Bellico. No matter where you are right now, a quiet bedroom, a long dark highway, or a city that refuses to sleep, and no matter what hour your clock is showing, midnight, 3 a.m., or the first gray light before dawn, you've arrived just in time. Tonight we travel deep into the American wilderness, where park rangers spend their lives guarding forests older than memory. They've seen things the maps don't show: footsteps with no owner, cabins that breathe, names whispered from the trees. So turn off the lights, lower the volume to a whisper, and listen closely. Because what you're about to hear actually happened. I'd been driving long-haul trucks for the past 15 years, but nothing could have prepared me for what happened last week. My name is Carter Wainwright. I'm not the kind of guy to scare easy, but you see a lot out there on the road. This was different. Real different. The morning had started like any other. I woke up in my cab at a truck stop outside Raleigh, grabbed a shower and some eggs at the diner, and checked my dispatch. New load, heading west. Standard stuff. The skies were overcast, promising rain later, but that was fine by me. I liked the sound of raindrops on the roof of my Peterbilt while I drove. Made for good thinking time. The dispatch sent me to this little factory in the foothills of North Carolina, woodworking place making furniture or something. Wasn't really my business what was in the containers, just that they got where they needed to go on time. My GPS took me off the main highways and onto increasingly narrow roads until I found myself in one of those towns that seems to exist outside of time. It was one of those places with one gas station, a half-abandoned diner, and more rusted-out trucks on front lawns than people walking the streets. Winston, North Carolina, population who the hell knows. The kind of place where everyone stares when you pull in, like they can smell the outsider on you. I stopped for diesel at the only gas station, a weathered building with one ancient pump. The attendant, an old man with tobacco-stained fingers and eyes that had seen too much, barely looked at me when I paid. Highway 38 washed out in the storm last month, he muttered, counting my change slowly. They fixed it, but you still want to be careful out that way, especially as it gets dark. I nodded, not thinking much of it. Locals always had warnings about their roads, usually amounted to nothing. The factory was a few miles outside town, a sprawling single-story building surrounded by stacks of timber. The loading went smooth enough, but I couldn't shake this feeling like I was being watched. The workers were quiet, efficient, but none of them would look me in the eye. Just loaded up my trailer and sent me on my way with minimal paperwork. It was around 2 in the afternoon when I left, which would put me hitting the interstate by 5 or so. Plenty of time to make good progress before I needed to stop for the night. Highway 38 was exactly what the dispatcher had described, a narrow, winding road cutting through dense woods that stretched out for miles. There was no cell reception out there, but I wasn't worried about that. Just me and the rig. Nothing but trees on either side and that low hum of tires on asphalt. I loved the solitude of it. The woods were thick here, old-growth forest that hadn't been cut back properly from the roadside. Branches reached across the pavement like grasping fingers, making shadows dance across my windshield. The GPS signal faded in and out, but I didn't need it. The road only went one way. I hadn't been driving more than an hour when I noticed something weird up ahead. There was this beat-up Chevy truck, mid-'80s model by the looks of it, crawling along the road. It wasn't that the truck was slow, it was that the guy driving it kept swerving into the opposite lane, like he didn't know how to handle it, or maybe like he was looking for something on the side of the road. I thought about passing him, but the road was too tight with all those curves, so I hung back, figuring maybe the guy was drunk or just having a bad day. After a couple more miles of this, the Chevy suddenly veered off to the side, coming to a jerky stop on the narrow shoulder. I relaxed a bit, glad to get the road back to myself, and drove past him. As I passed, I glanced over and saw the driver, a man with a thick beard and wild, tangled hair. He didn't look at me, just stared straight ahead, gripping the wheel tight enough to make his knuckles white. Something about him seemed off, but I let it go. People are weird sometimes, especially out in these remote places. The sky was darkening earlier than it should have, those clouds from the morning finally rolling in with the promise of a storm. The radio faded in and out, mostly static with occasional bursts of music or voices. I switched it off and settled into the quiet. Just the rumble of my engine and the thoughts in my head. I'd been driving trucks since my early 30s. After my marriage fell apart, and I needed something that would let me start fresh. The road had been good to me. It gave me purpose, structure, a way to be alone without being lonely. My ex-wife, Elaine, used to say I loved the truck more than I loved her. Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. I was lost in these thoughts when I saw the Chevy again, pulled off the road a few miles ahead. This time, the driver was out of the truck. He stood by the side of the road, facing the woods, motionless. His posture was rigid, like he was listening for something. I slowed down, thinking I'd ask if he needed help. I didn't see any movement in the trees, but there was something about how still he was that gave me pause. Something wasn't right. As I approached, the guy suddenly turned his head toward me. His face was wrong, not just scruffy or dirty, but twisted, like someone had carved pieces off and rearranged them in a hurry. His eyes weren't right either. They weren't looking at me. They were looking through me like I wasn't even there. I kept driving. The thought of stopping to talk to him vanished, but my heart was racing. I checked the rearview mirror as I passed, and he was standing there watching my truck as it went by. Or maybe it was something else he was watching. The rain started then, a light drizzle at first, then picking up until it was drumming against my windshield. I turned the wipers on high, trying to focus on the road ahead and forget about that man and his unsettling gaze. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen something I wasn't supposed to see. Something that would follow me long after this drive was over. The rain didn't let up as I continued down Highway 38. If anything, it got worse, sheets of water cascading across my windshield faster than the wipers could clear them. The road ahead was a blur of gray and black. The trees on either side nothing more than looming shadows. I kept thinking about that man with the twisted face. There had been something fundamentally wrong about him, like he wasn't fully, I don't know, human? That thought sent a chill down my spine. I'd spent enough nights alone on the road to know how the mind can play tricks, how isolation can turn ordinary things sinister. Get it together, Carter, I muttered to myself, adjusting my grip on the wheel. Just some local weirdo, but the unease lingered, wrapping itself around my thoughts like a vine. I switched the radio back on, hoping for something to break the silence, but got nothing but static. The crackling filled the cab, somehow making the silence worse. I glanced at my watch. Just past 4. Still about an hour before I'd hit the interstate, assuming this weather didn't slow me down too much. I'd planned to push on until at least 9 before finding a truck stop for the night. The sooner I got out of these woods, the better. The rain eased up slightly, and that's when I saw it in the distance. The same beat-up Chevy pulled off to the side again. My stomach tightened. There was no way he could have gotten ahead of me. I hadn't passed any side roads, no shortcuts that would let someone leapfrog past me. Yet there it was, the rust-spotted blue truck parked half on the shoulder, with its hazards blinking weakly. I slowed my rig, peering through the rain. The driver wasn't visible inside the cab. I should have just kept going. Every instinct told me to floor it and leave this stretch of road behind. But something made me pull over. Maybe it was 15 years of seeing accidents and breakdowns, of knowing that sometimes the only help on these forgotten roads was from other drivers. Or maybe it was simple curiosity. The need to confirm what I was seeing was real. I stopped my truck about 50 yards behind the Chevy and sat there for a minute, engine idling, rain drumming on the roof. Through my side mirror, I could see the woods stretching endlessly behind me. No other cars had passed since I'd been on this road. Just me and whatever was waiting in that truck ahead. I grabbed my heavy maglite from under the seat. It doubled as a decent weapon if needed, and stepped out into the rain. The cold water hitting my face helped clear my head a bit. I approached the Chevy cautiously, calling out as I got closer. "Hey there, you need some help?" No answer. The truck's driver's side door was ajar, rain soaking the seat inside. But no driver. I circled around the vehicle, checking to see if maybe he was changing a tire or something. Nothing. That's when I noticed the footprints leading from the truck into the woods. They were deep in the mud, like whoever made them had been running or carrying something heavy. I hesitated at the tree line, shining my flashlight into the dense undergrowth. The beam disappeared a few yards in, swallowed by the darkness between the trees. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "Anybody there?" Something moved in the woods. Just a quick rustle of leaves. Could have been an animal. But then I heard it. A low moan, distinctly human, coming from somewhere in the darkness. Common sense told me to get back in my truck and call for help when I reached civilization. But that sound, it was pained. Desperate. Someone could be hurt. I took a few steps into the woods, following the footprints. The canopy above was so thick that it was almost like night under there, even in the afternoon. My flashlight created a narrow tunnel of visibility, everything beyond it lost in shadow. The moaning came again, closer now. I pushed forward, branches scraping against my jacket. The rain barely penetrated here, just an occasional drip from the leaves above. The woods had a strange smell, not the usual earthy forest scent, but something metallic and wrong. After about 20 yards, the footprints stopped at the base of a massive oak tree. There was no one there. I swept my flashlight around, confused. The moaning had stopped too. That's when I noticed the carvings on the tree. Symbols, hundreds of them, etched into the bark all the way around the trunk. They weren't like anything I'd seen before, not letters or pictures exactly, but something in between. They seemed to shift when I looked at them directly, like they were moving under their own power. I reached out, drawn to touch them. My fingers were inches from the bark when a hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around, nearly falling, and found myself face to face with the man from the Chevy. Up close, his features were even more distorted than I'd first thought. His eyes were too wide, too round, sunk deep in their sockets. His skin seemed to hang loose on one side of his face, like it was sliding off the bone underneath. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice raspy and wet. "This isn't for you to see." I backed away, heart pounding. I heard someone hurt, was just trying to help. The man tilted his head, an unnaturally sharp movement like a bird of prey. "Help?" He seemed to find this amusing. "No help needed here, but you should go, now, before they notice you." "Before who notices me?" I asked, grip tightening on my flashlight. The man just stared, those wrong eyes boring into me. Then he smiled, revealing teeth that were filed to points. I ran. I didn't think, didn't look back, just crashed through the underbrush toward the road. Branches whipped at my face and arms, but I barely felt them. When I broke through to the pavement, I was gasping for breath, soaked with rain and sweat. The Chevy was gone. The spot where it had been parked was empty, not even tire tracks in the mud. I stood there, staring at the empty shoulder, trying to make sense of it. Had I imagined the whole thing? Was I losing my mind out here in the middle of nowhere? I walked back to my truck on shaky legs, constantly looking over my shoulder. As I climbed into the cab, I caught a glimpse of something moving at the edge of the woods. Just for a second, a pale shape ducking behind a tree. Then nothing. I locked the doors, started the engine, and pulled back onto the road. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I turned the heater up, but the chill had settled deep in my bones. Something was very wrong on this road, and I needed to get to the interstate as quickly as possible. As I drove, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see the Chevy appear behind me. But the road remained empty, just me and the rain and the darkening sky. And the growing certainty that whatever I'd encountered in those woods wasn't something I could explain away as just another roadside weirdo. The symbols on that tree kept flashing in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen them before, somewhere, but couldn't place where. And the man's warning. Before they notice you. Who were they? What would happen if they did notice? Questions without answers, piling up like the miles behind me. All I knew for sure was that I needed to keep driving, keep moving forward. Because whatever was back there in those woods, I didn't want it following me. I'd been driving for another half hour, the rain finally letting up, when my headlights cut through the dusk and illuminated something that made my blood freeze. The same damn Chevy. This time it was parked dead center in the road, completely blocking the narrow highway. My heart sank into my stomach. I pulled to a stop a few hundred feet behind it, engine rumbling softly in the quiet night. I turned on my hazards and just sat there for a minute, thinking. The guy had to have taken some back road or trail to get ahead of me, but how? There weren't any side roads, no intersections. And that truck, there was no way he'd beaten me there. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Logic said this couldn't be the same truck, had to be another one, similar model, similar color. But deep down, I knew it was the same dent in the tailgate, the same mismatched side mirror, the same wrongness emanating from it like heat waves. I reached under my seat and grabbed the wrench I kept there. I don't carry a gun, never had the reason, didn't think I'd ever need one. I wasn't feeling so confident about that choice right now. The sun had almost completely set, the last purple streaks of daylight fading from the sky. In the growing darkness, the woods on either side of the road seemed to press closer, listening, waiting. I stepped out of the cab and started walking toward the Chevy, keeping my distance. The driver was nowhere to be seen. The only sound was the faint ticking of my truck's engine cooling in the night air and the drip of water from the trees. "Hey, you all right?" I hollered out. My voice echoed through the trees and came back to me unanswered. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I got closer to the Chevy. The truck was empty, the driver's side door wide open. Inside, the cab looked trashed, papers and fast food wrappers strewn everywhere. The seat was shredded like it had been torn apart by something with claws. There was something else too. Blood. Not a lot, just some smears on the steering wheel and the dash, as if the driver had cut himself or worse. I peered into the woods beyond the truck, half expecting to see him standing there. The trees were thick, their branches twisted together like skeletal arms. The darkness beyond them was impenetrable. My instinct screamed at me to get back in the truck and leave, but I couldn't move. Not yet. Then I heard it. A rustling sound, not too far off in the woods. I gripped the wrench tighter and took a few steps closer to the tree line. That's when I saw him. The man from the Chevy was standing just inside the woods, his back to me. He was hunched over, as if he was staring at something on the ground. I called out to him again, but he didn't move. I took another step, and that's when I realized what he was standing over. It wasn't a what, it was a who. A body, limp and crumpled in the leaves, blood pooled around it, soaking into the dirt. The man didn't react to me at all, just kept standing there, silent. I took a step back. My mind raced. Was that body alive? Was it dead? And what the hell had this guy done? Panic surged through me. I was way too deep into something I didn't understand, and I sure as hell wasn't equipped to deal with it. That's when the man straightened up and turned around. His face. God. His face was even more distorted up close. Flesh hung from his jaw, in a way that made no sense, like his skin was trying to melt off but couldn't quite finish the job. And those eyes. It wasn't just that they weren't seeing me. It was like they had never seen anything human in the first place. He took a step toward me and I noticed something in his hand, a knife, crude and jagged, dripping with what could only be blood. I bolted. I ran back to my truck faster than I've ever run in my life. My breath was coming out in ragged gasps by the time I slammed the door shut behind me. I didn't care about the load, didn't care about anything except getting the hell out of there. But as I fumbled with my keys, I realized I had a problem. That Chevy was still blocking the road. There was barely enough room on either side to squeeze a motorcycle through, let alone my 18-wheeler. I was trapped. The man emerged from the woods, walking with an uneven gait toward my truck. He wasn't running, wasn't in any hurry, like he knew I had nowhere to go. I started the engine and locked the doors, mind racing. There had to be a way out of this. The shoulder was too soft from the rain. If I tried to go around, I'd get stuck for sure. The only option was through. I put the truck in gear, took a deep breath, and hit the gas. My rig lurched forward, picking up speed. The man stopped walking, watching as I barreled toward the Chevy. The impact was jarring, metal screeching against metal as my bumper connected with the smaller truck's side. For a moment, I thought it wouldn't budge, that I'd just ram into it and stop. But physics was on my side. The Chevy skidded sideways, tires leaving black streaks on the pavement, until it finally toppled over the edge of the shoulder and down into the ditch. I kept going, not slowing down, even as my truck rattled and protested from the collision. In my side mirror, I could see the man standing in the middle of the road, getting smaller as I put distance between us. He wasn't chasing me, just watching. That was almost worse. I drove like hell, taking the curves too fast, knowing that any mistake could send me off the road. But fear kept my hand steady on the wheel. Fear of what was behind me, of what I'd seen in those woods. The minutes stretched like hours as I pushed my rig to its limits. Finally, I saw lights ahead. The interstate, civilization, safety, or at least the illusion of it. As I merged onto the highway, joining the flow of cars and trucks, I felt something loosen in my chest. The tension that had been building since I first saw that Chevy began to dissipate. I was out. I was away from that place. But as I settled into the rhythm of interstate driving, I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. That body in the woods, the man with the knife, the symbols carved into the tree. It was like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together, or maybe one where I was missing most of the pieces. I drove straight through the night, stopping only when absolutely necessary for fuel. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that twisted face, those filing cabinet teeth. And I wondered about the person in the woods. Were they the first? Or just the latest in a long line of unfortunate souls who'd encountered that man on that forgotten stretch of road? Questions that would haunt me long after this drive was over. I rolled into Asheville just as dawn was breaking, the sky turning from black to deep blue. I hadn't slept in over 24 hours, running on nothing but adrenaline and gas station coffee. My hands had finally stopped shaking, but my mind wouldn't quiet down. I kept replaying everything I'd seen, trying to make sense of it. I found the police station in the center of town, a solid brick building with American flags flanking the entrance. For a moment I sat in my truck, wondering if I should even go in. What was I going to tell them? That I'd seen a man with a melting face standing over a body in the woods? That his truck kept appearing and disappearing? They'd think I was on something. But I couldn't just drive away, not with what I'd seen. Someone was dead in those woods. Or at least I was pretty sure they were dead. And if there was even a chance they weren't. I dragged myself inside, feeling the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me. The front desk officer looked up, taking in my disheveled appearance with a carefully neutral expression. "Can I help you, sir?" I cleared my throat. "I need to report something I saw out on Highway 38. She nodded and called over a detective, a middle-aged man with a receding hairline and tired eyes. Detective Mercer, his nameplate read. He led me to a small interview room with walls the color of nicotine stains and offered me coffee, which I accepted gratefully. "All right, Mr. Wainwright," he said after I'd given him my information. "Tell me what happened." I started at the beginning, with picking up the load in Winston. I told him about the first sighting of the Chevy, the strange man on the side of the road. As I spoke, I found myself holding back certain details. The way the man's face seemed to shift and melt. How his truck appeared ahead of me when it should have been impossible. I wasn't ready to sound completely crazy. "And you're sure you saw a body?" Mercer asked, making notes in a small pad. "Yes, in the woods, just off the highway, where the Chevy was blocking the road. The man was standing over it with a knife." "And you hit his vehicle with your truck?" I nodded. It was blocking the road completely. I had no choice. Mercer tapped his pen against the pad, studying me. "Did you get a license plate number?" I hadn't. In all the chaos, I hadn't even thought to look. "Could you describe this man in more detail? Height, weight, distinguishing features?" "Tall, maybe 6'2", thin but strong-looking, had a beard and long, tangled hair, and his face—" I hesitated. His face was, I don't know how to describe it. Disfigured, maybe? Like he'd been in an accident or something. Mercer nodded, still writing. "And approximately where on Highway 38 did this occur?" I tried to pinpoint it, but that stretch of road had been so uniform, just endless trees and curves. Maybe 30-40 minutes east of the interstate. There was a big oak tree near where I saw him in the woods. "The one with the carvings?" Mercer asked casually. I stared at him. "You know about that tree?" He set down his pen and sighed. "Mr. Wainwright, you're not the first person to come in here with a story about Highway 38. That road has a bit of a reputation." "What kind of reputation?" I leaned forward. "Missing persons, mostly. People who were last seen driving that stretch. Most turn up eventually. Car broke down, they got lost, decided to take a side trip without telling anyone. But some don't." He shrugged. It's remote country out there, easy to disappear if you want to, or if someone wants you to. So you believe me about what I saw? Mercer's expression was carefully neutral. I believe you saw something that disturbed you enough to come here. We'll send a patrol car out to check the area where you think this occurred. I sat back, frustrated. He was humoring me. There's a body out there, and that man, he's dangerous. We'll look into it, Mr. Wainwright, I promise you that. But right now, I think what you need most is some rest. You've been driving all night and you've had a traumatic experience. I couldn't argue with that. I felt like I might collapse at any moment. Mercer gave me his card, told me to call if I remembered anything else, and recommended a motel nearby. As I was leaving, he called after me. Mr. Wainwright, one more thing. Did you happen to stop in Winston? Talk to anyone there? I told him about the gas station attendant, the warning about the road. Mercer nodded, seemingly unsurprised. The locals know to be careful on that highway, especially after dark. Maybe next time, take their advice. I checked into the motel Mercer recommended, a rundown place on the edge of town with a flickering vacancy sign. I was too exhausted to care about the stained carpet or the smell of old cigarettes that permeated the room. I just needed to shut my eyes, to stop seeing that twisted face and the body in the leaves every time I blinked. Sleep came quickly, but offered no real rest. My dreams were filled with dark woods and twisted symbols, with a truck that appeared and disappeared like a ghost. I woke up several times, heart racing, convinced that the man from the Chevy was standing at the foot of my bed. But it was just shadows playing tricks in the dim light filtering through the cheap curtains. I slept through most of the day and woke around dusk, groggy and disoriented. My phone showed 3 missed calls from my dispatcher, wondering why I hadn't checked in and where their delivery was. I'd have to deal with that, but first, I needed to know what the police had found. I called Detective Mercer, but got his voicemail. I left a message asking for an update, and then tried the station directly. The desk officer told me he was out, following up on something. Wouldn't say what. With nothing else to do, I showered, tried to make myself look less like someone who'd seen a ghost, and walked to a diner across from the motel. I wasn't hungry, but I needed to eat, to try to regain some sense of normalcy. The waitress, a woman named Darlene with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair, must have sensed something was off. She brought me extra toast with my eggs and kept my coffee cup filled without my having to ask. You passing through? She asked as she refilled my cup for the 3rd time. I nodded. Truck driver. Got delayed on Highway 38. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition maybe, or concern. That right? Don't hear of many truckers taking that route these days. Dispatcher's idea, not mine. Trust me, I won't be going that way again. Darlene hesitated, then slid into the booth across from me. The diner was almost empty, just a couple of locals at the counter. You saw something out there, didn't you? I set down my fork, appetite vanishing. What makes you say that? That look in your eyes. Seen it before. People come through here sometimes after driving that road, especially at night. She lowered her voice. They call him the highway man, you know, the one with the funny face. A chill ran down my spine. Who does? Locals, people who've seen him, been stories about him for years, decades even. What kind of stories? Darlene glanced around, then leaned closer. They say he takes people, drivers who break down, hikers who stray too far into the woods. They disappear, and he gets a new face. A new face? She nodded solemnly. That's why he looks wrong. Each piece comes from someone different. At least, that's what they say. I pushed my plate away, suddenly feeling sick. That's just a story, a local legend. Maybe. Darlene straightened up, her moment of conspiratorial intimacy passing. Or maybe there's something to it. Either way, you made it out. Some don't. She left me with that thought in the check. I paid and hurried back to the motel, looking over my shoulder the whole way. The conversation had left me unsettled, stirring up all the fear and confusion I'd been trying to suppress. Back in my room, I tried Mercer again. This time he answered. Mr. Wainwright, I was about to call you. Did you find anything out on the highway? There was a pause. We found blood. A significant amount in the location you described, and signs of a struggle. My heart raced. And the body? No body. But we're treating it as a potential homicide. We've got state police involved now. And the man, the one with the disfigured face? Another pause. We're looking into several persons of interest. I can't say more than that right now. What about the Chevy? I hit it pretty hard. It should have been in the ditch. There was no vehicle at the scene, Mr. Wainwright, just some broken glass and paint chips. Blue paint, like you described. Mercer's voice changed, becoming more official. I'm going to need you to stay in town for at least another day. We have more questions, and we need to take a formal statement. I agreed, though the thought of staying another night in Asheville, so close to Highway 38, made my skin crawl. After hanging up, I double-checked the locks on my door and wedged a chair under the handle for good measure. It was going to be another long night. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about what Darlene had said. Each piece comes from someone different. Was that what I'd seen in the woods? Was the highwayman collecting another piece for his patchwork face? It was a ridiculous thought. The stuff of campfire stories and horror movies. But then, everything about this experience had been beyond rational explanation. The truck that couldn't possibly have gotten ahead of me. The symbols that seemed to move on their own. The face that wasn't quite a face. Sleep, when it finally came, was thin and restless. And in my dreams, a blue Chevy followed me down an endless road, its headlights burning like eyes in the darkness. 3 days later, I was back behind the wheel of my truck, heading west on I-40. The load I'd been carrying was long gone. My company had sent another driver to handle it after I explained the situation. They weren't happy, but they understood. Sort of. As far as they knew, I'd witnessed a possible murder and was cooperating with police. The rest, the impossible truck, the man with the wrong face, I kept to myself. I'd spent those 3 days in Asheville giving statements to local police and then state investigators. They'd combed the area I described but found no sign of the body I'd seen. Just blood, lots of it, and drag marks leading deeper into the woods. They promised to keep looking, to let me know if they found anything. But their eyes said they didn't expect to. Detective Mercer had been the most understanding. On my last day in town, he'd taken me for coffee and told me more about Highway 38. First report I know of was in 1987, he'd said, stirring sugar into his cup. Campers heard screams in the night, found a car abandoned on the road the next morning, driver's door open, blood on the seat. Driver was never found. And since then, every few years something happens. Someone disappears. Sometimes we find evidence, sometimes not. Never enough to build a case. Against who? Mercer had just shrugged. That's the question, isn't it? Locals have their theories. Ghost stories, mostly. But whatever's out there, it's been there a long time. I'd asked about the tree with the symbols. Mercer admitted they'd found it based on my description. But the carvings looked old, weathered. Like they'd been there for decades, not days. None of it made sense. And now, as I watched the miles roll by on a different highway, headed for a routine delivery in Tennessee, I still couldn't make the pieces fit together. Part of me wanted to forget the whole thing, to file it away as some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But I knew what I'd seen. My CB crackled to life, breaking into my thoughts. A familiar voice came through the static. Breaker 19, this is eastbound Eddie, looking for the Nighthawk. You out there, Nighthawk? Eddie was an old friend, another long hauler I ran into on the roads from time to time. I picked up the mic. This is Nighthawk. Good to hear your voice, Eddie. Where you at? About 20 miles behind you, partner. Caught your rig in my sights a while back. Thought we might grab some dinner when you stop. The prospect of company was welcome. I'd been alone with my thoughts too long. Sounds good. Planning to pull in at the big spur truck stop up ahead. Roger that. See you in 30. I relaxed a bit, knowing I'd have someone to talk to soon. Eddie was good people. Straightforward, honest, with none of the BS you sometimes got from other drivers. Maybe telling him about what happened would help me process it. Or at least the parts I could tell without sounding completely insane. The sun was setting as I pulled into the truck stop, a sprawling complex with a diner, showers, and a large parking area for rigs. I found a spot, shut down my engine, and went inside to claim a booth. Eddie showed up about 20 minutes later, his familiar bulk casting a shadow over the table as he approached. "Carter Wainwright, as I live and breathe," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "You look like hell warmed over, my friend." I managed a grin. "Good to see you too, Eddie." We ordered, steak for him, just a burger for me, and caught up on the usual trucker talk. Road conditions, weather forecast, which companies were hiring or firing. It was comfortable, normal. For a little while I could pretend that nothing had changed, but Eddie knew me too well. As we waited for our food, he leaned back and fixed me with a steady gaze. "All right, spit it out. What's eating you?" I hesitated, then told him a version of what had happened. I left out the impossible parts. The truck appearing ahead of me, the symbols that moved, the way the man's face seemed to be made of mismatched pieces. I just said I'd witnessed what looked like a murder and had to stay to talk to police. Eddie listened without interrupting, his expression growing more concerned as I went on. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "That's rough, buddy. No wonder you look strung out." "Yeah, well, wouldn't you be, after seeing something like that?" He nodded slowly. "Sure would. But you know what the weird thing is? This ain't the first time I've heard a story like this." My food turned to ash in my mouth. "What do you mean?" "About 10 years back, there was this driver, Blake something. Good guy, reliable. He was taking a shortcut through North Carolina, similar area to where you were. Called his dispatcher to check in, said he'd be delayed because some beat-up truck was blocking the road." I set down my fork. "And?" "That was the last anyone heard from him. They found his rig 2 days later, parked on the shoulder, driver's door open, keys in the ignition. No sign of Blake." I felt the hair on my arms stand up. "Did they find anything else? Any evidence?" Eddie shook his head. "Nothing solid. Some blood in the cab, but not enough to indicate he'd been killed there. Search dogs lost his scent at the tree line." He paused. "There was one weird thing, though. The cops found another vehicle a few miles away, hidden in the woods off a service road. An old Chevy pickup." My heart was pounding now. "Blue?" Eddie looked surprised. "Yeah, actually. How'd you know?" I couldn't tell him. Couldn't explain that the truck I'd seen was something more than just a vehicle, that it seemed to follow its own rules about time and space. "Just a guess," I said weakly. "What happened to the Chevy?" "Police impounded it. No registration, no VIN number. Like it didn't officially exist. And here's the kicker. When they went back for it a few days later, it was gone. Just disappeared from the impound lot. No sign of forced entry. No records of anyone taking it out." Eddie shook his head. "Whole thing was strange as hell." We finished our meal in relative silence, both lost in our own thoughts. As we were paying, Eddie put a hand on my shoulder. "Listen, Carter. Maybe you should take some time off. What you saw, that's not something you just shake off." I nodded, but knew I wouldn't. The road was my home, my sanctuary. Even with what had happened, I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. We said our goodbyes in the parking lot, promising to catch up again soon. As Eddie walked away, he called back over his shoulder. "Hey, one more thing. Stay off those back roads, you hear? Stick to the interstates." I waved acknowledgement and climbed back into my cab. It was fully dark now, the parking lot illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights that created pools of brightness amid the shadows. I checked my logs, calculated how much further I could drive before I needed to stop for the night. As I prepared to pull out, I noticed a vehicle at the far end of the lot, partly hidden in the darkness beyond the lights. My breath caught. It couldn't be. But my eyes weren't playing tricks. It was a blue Chevy pickup, rust-spotted and dented in all the familiar places. I froze, keys in the ignition, heart hammering in my chest. It had followed me, or found me. Either way, it was here. Movement caught my eye. Someone walking across the lot, heading for the truck. A tall figure with an uneven gait. I couldn't see his face from this distance, but I didn't need to. I knew who it was. I should have called the police. Should have gone back inside where there were witnesses. Instead, I started my engine and pulled out of the lot as quickly as I could, not looking back. Fear had me in its grip again, pushing rational thought aside. I drove through the night, pushing the speed limit, checking my mirrors constantly. I kept expecting to see headlights behind me gaining ground, but the road remained clear. Whatever that thing was, man or monster or something in between, it hadn't followed, at least not that I could see. Now, a week later, I'm back on the road doing what I've always done. But things have changed. I stick to major highways, never take shortcuts. I don't drive after dark if I can help it. And I never, ever stop if I see a blue Chevy pickup. I've searched online for information about Highway 38 and the surrounding area. Most of what I found was standard local history, logging operations, a few small towns that thrived and then declined. But buried in some obscure forums and blogs, I found stories, accounts from other drivers, hikers, locals. Tales of a man whose face wasn't quite right, who appeared where he shouldn't be, who took people into the woods. Some called him the highwayman, others the face thief. In the oldest stories dating back to the 1940s, he was simply the collector. Different names, but always the same description, always the blue truck, always the disappearances. I don't know what I encountered out there on that lonely stretch of road. Don't know if it was human or something else entirely. All I know is that I got away when others didn't. And that knowledge haunts me every day. Sometimes at night, when I'm parked at some anonymous truck stop, I think I see him. A tall figure at the edge of the lot, watching, waiting. I tell myself it's just my imagination, my mind playing tricks after what I went through. But deep down, I know better. Because whatever that was, whoever he was, he's still out there somewhere, moving between the cracks in the world, collecting pieces for his broken face. And I hope I never see him again. But sometimes, in my rearview mirror, I catch a glimpse of something blue. My name is Howard Forrester, though everyone calls me Hank. This happened back in 2009 at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee, when I still worked as a seasonal ranger and honestly thought I had seen enough strange things to last a lifetime. Back then, I was 32, with more energy than sense and a fondness for solitude that made ranger work perfect for me. I spent my days patrolling trails, clearing fallen branches, double-checking campfire permits, and reminding visitors that the black bears weren't pets. The Smokies aren't like other parks. They're older somehow, with mists that curl through ancient trees in ways that make you wonder if time moves differently in certain hollows. During my 3 years as a ranger, I'd encountered plenty of wildlife. Black bears were common enough that we had protocols for them. Cougars were rare but documented. Coyotes, bobcats. Every animal left distinctive signs, tracks, scat, kill patterns. You learned to read the forest like a book. I like to start my mornings early, usually around 6, and always with a cup of instant coffee in my truck before heading out. On that particular day, October 27th, the air felt oddly still. Too cold for comfort, yet not cold enough for the season's first real freeze. A perfect day for something to go wrong. I remember wearing an old green jacket with a zipper that stuck whenever I tugged it too fast. The jacket had been with me through college and 2 previous seasonal jobs. It smelled like pine sap and campfire smoke, no matter how many times I washed it. "Hank, you there?" The radio crackled at my hip as I finished my coffee. "Go ahead, Malcolm," I replied. Malcolm Gray had been chief ranger for 15 years. He'd seen everything the mountains could throw at a person and never seemed rattled by any of it. "Got a situation. Couple of campers didn't check out yesterday evening. Permit says they're Nathan Stevens and Laura Collins, mid-40s, experienced hikers. They signed in for the Alum Cave Trail section, planning to camp near the creek bend." Malcolm's voice had that professional flatness we all developed when something might be wrong. "You want me to look for them?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Affirmative. They're about 3 miles in from Service Road 28. Last known location matches your patrol route today anyway." He paused. "Probably nothing, but check it out. Radio's been spotty near that ridge, so don't be a hero if you find trouble." "Roger that. I'll head there first thing." Usually this wasn't a big deal. People lost track of time, got stuck in the dark, or camped one more night. Most missing hikers were found walking out on their own, apologetic and embarrassed. Still, something about Malcolm's tone made me uneasy. I started up my truck and headed toward Service Road 28. The radio silent except for routine check-ins from other rangers. The day remained eerily still. No wind through the trees, no distant thunder, not even many birds calling. October in the Smokies typically brought crisp mornings with busy wildlife preparing for winter, but today felt muted. As I drove, I reviewed what I knew about the area. Alum Cave wasn't actually a cave, just a concave bluff about 5 miles from the main road. The trail leading there was popular with day hikers, but beyond it stretched less traveled paths where backpackers could find solitude. Nathan and Laura had apparently headed further in, toward a bend in Crawford Creek where camping was permitted with the proper wilderness permit. The road narrowed as I climbed higher, gravel crunching under my tires. The forest pressed close on both sides, trees reaching toward each other across the narrow gap. I passed no other vehicles. When I reached the edge of my assigned section, I turned off the engine and stepped out. The forest looked normal. Tall trees, a few patches of damp leaves, a faint, earthy smell. Nothing felt dramatic. But my gut told me something was off, a sensation I'd learned to trust over the years. I checked my gear: radio, first aid kit, multi-tool, flashlight, water, trail maps, and a small canister of bear spray, standard equipment for a day patrol. I had no firearm. Park policy restricted those to law enforcement rangers, which I wasn't. At that moment, for reasons I couldn't articulate, I wished I had more than bear spray. Before heading into the forest, I radioed my position to dispatch. Starting search for Stevens and Collins from Service Road 28 heading toward Crawford Creek Bend. Copy that, Hank. Check in every 30 minutes. I shouldered my pack and started down the narrow trail. The fallen leaves muffled my footsteps, creating an unnerving silence, broken only by my breathing. Typically, I enjoyed these solo hikes, but today each step felt heavier than the last. About a mile in, I noticed the first oddity: a walking stick leaning against a tree, carved with initials NS. It seemed deliberately placed, not dropped. I radioed this in, then continued forward with a growing sense of unease. The trail descended into a ravine before climbing toward a ridge that would eventually lead to Crawford Creek. The shadows deepened as the forest canopy thickened overhead. I found myself checking my watch frequently, not for the time but to confirm that reality was still functioning normally. Twice I paused, thinking I heard something moving parallel to my path just beyond sight. Each time I called out, "Hello, park ranger?" Only silence answered. After 45 minutes of hiking, I crossed a small tributary that fed into Crawford Creek. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. I noticed a single boot print at the edge, recent, deep, as if someone had stumbled rather than stepped. Just beyond the crossing, I found a torn strip of blue nylon caught on a thorny bush. It looked like tent material. I bagged it as evidence and continued forward, my pace quickening despite the voice in my head telling me to turn back, to radio for backup before going further. The path narrowed as it followed the tributary toward its junction with Crawford Creek. The trees here were older, their trunks twisted into shapes that seemed almost deliberate, their roots creating natural barriers across the trail. Twice I had to climb over fallen logs that hadn't been there during my patrol the previous week. That's when I noticed the footprints, not the orderly impressions of hikers following a trail, but scattered prints that veered in multiple directions, as if someone had run without any clear destination. Near them lay a broken tent pole, its aluminum shaft bent at an unnatural angle. I heard something behind me, just a twig snapping, and turned fast, heart pounding. Nothing there, just a squirrel. Or maybe a wind gust moving a dead branch. I relaxed, or tried to. The creek bend should be just ahead. I checked my watch, 9:17 a.m. The morning seemed to have stretched into eternity, yet I'd been hiking less than an hour. I radioed in my position, noticing the slight static that indicated weakening signal strength. Approaching the creek bend now, found signs of disturbance, broken equipment, scattered footprints. Malcolm's voice came back, partially obscured by static. Copy, careful, backup if. I acknowledged and continued forward, unaware that in the next 20 minutes, everything I understood about the natural world would be permanently altered. After another 20 yards, I saw their tent. It stood in a small clearing set up near Crawford Creek, where the water widened into a shallow pool before continuing downhill. The sight would have been picturesque if not for the obvious signs of disturbance. The tent flap gaped open, the zipper torn from its seams. Their gear lay scattered: a half-burned lantern candle, a couple of water bottles, cooking equipment thrown haphazardly around the fire pit, and a sleeping bag that looked torn in a way that didn't feel right. The sight of that bag, shredded from the inside out, made my stomach twist. I approached slowly, calling out, "Hello, Ranger Hank Forrester here." No answer. The silence pressed in, broken only by the gentle sound of flowing water from the creek. My voice seemed to vanish into the trees without echo, as if the forest itself were absorbing any sound. The campsite told a story I didn't want to read. The fire pit contained cold ashes. They hadn't tended it since the previous evening, at least. A backpack leaned against a tree, its contents partially spilled. Energy bars, a map, a novel with a bookmark about halfway through. A cell phone lay nearby, its screen cracked. I picked up the phone, noting it was dead. No service out here anyway. I documented the scene with my own phone's camera, moving methodically despite my racing heart. That's when I noticed the blood. Not much, just dark splatters on a rock near the tent entrance. It looked dry, brownish, rather than crimson. I followed the direction of the spray and found more drops leading away from the campsite, into a thicket of rhododendron bushes. I found the first body a few steps behind the tent, slumped against a rock. A man wearing a navy fleece jacket. Nathan Stevens, presumably. The back of his head was, well, let's say it was damaged in a manner that made me look away, close my eyes, and try not to retch. The wound didn't look like any animal attack I'd ever seen. It was as if something had pressed against his skull until it gave way, not torn or bitten, but crushed. I forced myself to check for a pulse, knowing it was pointless. Nothing. His fingers were stiff and cold. He must have been dead at least since the previous night. My radio crackled, making me jump. I fumbled it to my mouth, my hands shaking. "This is Forrester. I found one of the hikers. Male, deceased. Signs of violence." I kept my voice as steady as possible. Malcolm's response came through clearer than before. "Damn, secure the scene. I'm sending Jennifer and coming myself. Animal attack?" I looked again at the body, at the strange nature of the wounds. "I don't think so. It doesn't match any predator pattern I'm familiar with. Stay put. We're 30 minutes out. Keep your radio on." I acknowledged and returned to examining the scene, keeping a respectful distance from Nathan's body. Now that I'd found one victim, I needed to locate Laura Collins. I crouched down and noticed deep scratches in the dirt surrounding the campsite. There was a second set of footprints, broader and oddly spaced, as if a heavy frame moved with an uneven gait. I found no drag marks that might suggest a large animal hauling a kill. Instead, it looked like something powerful had hit fast and then left. Following the blood trail and disturbed ground, I found Laura's body a few feet away, hidden behind a fallen log. Her injuries looked worse, which I won't detail out of respect. What I will say is that no known predator in these mountains kills like that. I forced myself to take in what I could without losing my composure. There were small bits of debris around her. She had dropped a can of bug spray, her glasses were snapped at the bridge, and one boot was missing. These weren't signs of a careful predator like a cougar or a bear. It looked more like chaos, something I couldn't fit into any pattern I recognized from years of wilderness experience. While waiting for backup, I paced the perimeter of the campsite, trying to piece together what happened. I had maybe 40 minutes before Malcolm and Jennifer arrived. The forest felt heavier somehow, the silence unnatural. I tried to crack a joke under my breath, something like, "You picked a hell of a day for this, Hank," just to keep my nerves steady. That's my habit, making light of things when I'm nervous. Didn't help much. My heart thudded against my ribs as I walked a wider perimeter around the campsite, looking for any clue about what might have done this. Bears leave distinctive signs, claw marks on trees, tracks with 5 toes and visible claws. Cougars are clean killers, with puncture wounds from their teeth. This scene had neither. That's when I spotted fresh scuff marks at the base of a large hemlock tree, about 15 yards from the campsite. The bark had strange horizontal scrapes about 7 feet up the trunk. At first, I thought a bear might have done it, but these marks didn't line up with claws. They looked more like something heavy had braced itself against the trunk, pressing in with a rough texture. Maybe something like long, irregular fingers or knobby limbs. I felt watched. Not certain of it, but that's how it felt. Like someone stood just out of sight, holding their breath. The sensation crawled up my spine, making the hair on my neck stand up. I turned slowly, scanning the forest around me. Hello? I called again, louder this time. Anyone there? My voice sounded too loud in the unnatural quiet. I moved closer to the tree with the strange marks, examining them more carefully. That's when I caught a glimpse of something on the hillside above, behind a screen of branches. It stood upright, broad-shouldered, maybe 7 feet tall. No clear details in that split second, just a dark shape, too large to be human, too upright to be a bear. It vanished behind a mossy boulder before I could focus properly, leaving me wondering if I'd imagined it. But the feeling of being watched intensified, and I bolted back toward the tent, fumbling with my radio. "Malcolm," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've got something unusual here. Big. Not sure what it is." "Bear?" he asked immediately. "Doesn't look like it. Stands upright, moving fast." There was a pause before he responded. "I've got the rifle. We're 20 minutes out. Stay in the open if you can." That made me feel marginally safer, though I wished the 20 minutes would pass instantly. Time dragged as I waited, every sound in the forest making me flinch. I alternated between watching the hillside where I'd seen the shape and checking the bodies, though there was nothing more I could do for them. Eventually, I worked up the courage to walk over to where I'd spotted the figure. The ground felt damp beneath my boots, and I detected a strange odor, a bit like old mushrooms mixed with something faintly metallic. The smell wasn't overpowering, but it was distinct and unlike anything I recognized. Not the musky scent of bear, not the sharp ammonia smell of cat urine. Something else entirely. I looked closer at the ground and saw faint impressions in the soil. Not paw prints, more like deep heel marks and something that resembled a misshapen handprint, with fingers too long and unevenly spaced. I felt my hands trembling as I took photos of these details with my phone. I wished I could unsee them. When you've been a ranger long enough, you start trusting known animals. Bears, coyotes, bobcats. There's a pattern to their behavior, their kills, their movements. This had no pattern I could recognize, and that terrified me more than anything else. I heard a branch crack somewhere in the forest and spun around, scanning the trees for movement. Nothing visible, but the feeling of being observed intensified. I backed toward the campsite, keeping my eyes on the surrounding forest. The waiting seemed endless, but finally, I heard human voices calling my name. Relief flooded through me as Malcolm Gray and Jennifer Wilcox appeared on the trail, Malcolm carrying his service rifle. "Over here," I called, waving them toward the campsite. "You're not going to believe this." Malcolm Gray looked exactly as he always did. Weathered face, salt and pepper beard, ranger hat pulled low over his eyes. The rifle in his hand seemed like a natural extension of his arms. Jennifer Wilcox, Jen to her friends, was newer to the service, maybe 26, with quick eyes and a reputation for staying calm in emergencies. Today, however, she looked tense, her hand resting on the bear spray at her belt. "What have we got, Hank?" Malcolm asked, his voice low and controlled as he surveyed the disturbed campsite. I led them to Nathan's body first. Malcolm crouched down, examining the wounds with a professional detachment I couldn't muster. Jen stayed back, her face paling slightly, but she kept her composure and began taking photographs with her department-issued camera. "Did you touch anything?" Malcolm asked without looking up. "Only checked for a pulse," I replied, keeping my voice as even as possible. "Bodies are cold. I'd say they've been dead since sometime last night." Malcolm nodded, then followed me to where Laura's body lay. His expression darkened as he took in the scene. "Jesus," he muttered, almost to himself. Jen took more photographs, documenting everything methodically, despite the horror of what we were seeing. "This doesn't look like any animal attack I've ever studied," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "That's not all," I said, and showed them the strange marks on the hemlock tree, the odd footprints, and described the figure I'd glimpsed on the hillside. Malcolm listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he simply asked, "Hank, what do you think happened here?" I shrugged, spreading my hands helplessly. "I don't know. Not a bear, not a cougar, and definitely not human." He gave me a sharp look, as if measuring how reliable my observations might be. Then he turned to Jen. "Radio for the sheriff's office and a search crew. We need more people up here." She nodded and stepped away to make the call. Her voice cracked slightly as she relayed our coordinates and requested assistance for a double homicide with unknown factors. Then the quiet fell again, broken only by the sounds of our movements as we continued to examine the scene. Malcolm knelt to inspect Nathan's injuries more closely, his expression grim. "No animal I know kills like this," he muttered. Jen walked a short distance upstream to see if the creek showed signs of footprints or other evidence. I leaned against a tree at the edge of the clearing, watching the tree line. The feeling of being observed hadn't diminished. That's when I saw it again, this time closer. It moved between two trunks, just a slight motion about 30 yards away. The shape was more distinct now, a broad torso covered in dark, patchy fur. The head looked small compared to its shoulders, almost disproportionate. I couldn't make out eyes, but I felt its gaze locked on us. The shape of it seemed off, like its limbs were too long and slightly bent in places where no joint should be. Something about its proportions suggested wrongness, as if it had been assembled from mismatched parts. I tried to call out, but my mouth felt dry. Finally, I whispered, "Malcolm." Before I could finish, that shape rushed toward us. It didn't move silently through the forest. There were snapping branches, a heavy rustling of leaves, the sound of something large displacing air as it charged. Malcolm spun around, rifle raised in one fluid motion. Jen shouted something that might have been a warning or a scream of surprise. I saw it break into the clearing, not smooth like a deer, not loping like a bear. It moved awkwardly yet fast, its legs throwing up leaves and dirt as it covered ground with impossible speed. The patchy fur revealed glimpses of grayish skin underneath, and its arms swung with a jerking motion that reminded me of a puppet with loose strings. Malcolm fired once. The crack of the rifle echoed through the trees. I heard the bullet hit a tree trunk as the creature swerved with unnatural agility. It disappeared behind a thick stand of rhododendrons, branches snapping as it passed. "What the hell was that?" Jen's voice shook as she backed toward us, her bear spray now in her hand. I wanted to say something clever or reassuring, but I only managed, "I have no idea." My hands shook worse now, adrenaline surging through my system. Malcolm kept his rifle trained on the spot where the creature had vanished. "Everyone back to back," he ordered. "Keep your eyes on the trees." We formed a tight triangle, scanning the forest in all directions. For several minutes nothing moved, except the leaves stirring in the slight breeze that had finally picked up. "We need to get back to the road," Malcolm said at last. "Mark the location, document what we can, and return with more people." I agreed immediately. Jen nodded, still looking pale but determined. As we prepared to leave, I felt that invisible weight of eyes again, that certainty of being watched. We gathered our equipment, took final photographs of the scene, and marked the location on our GPS units. Malcolm used bright orange trail tape to mark a route back to the bodies for the search team that would follow. As we left the clearing, I looked uphill one last time and saw it. This time I caught more detail. It stood about 50 yards away, partially concealed behind a dead pine trunk. Its body had a bony ridge along its spine, visible where patches of fur had fallen away, revealing skin that looked diseased or decayed. Its arms hung at its sides, fingers that looked too long for its hands dangling near its knees. Its head tilted slightly, as if curious about us or our behavior. I couldn't make out facial features clearly, just an impression of a flat nose and a wide mouth. Something about its posture suggested intelligence, not just animal awareness, but calculation. I almost tripped on a root, and when I looked up, it had slipped away again, moving silently this time. The contrast between its noisy charge earlier and its ghost-like disappearance now unsettled me further. "Did you see it?" I asked Malcolm, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded once, his expression grim. "Keep moving. Don't look back." We moved fast, practically jogging through the woods. Malcolm kept the rifle ready, checking over his shoulder frequently. Jen stayed between us, her camera still in her hands, though I doubted she'd have time to use it if that thing charged again. No one spoke. I could feel the sweat on my back despite the chill in the air. My breath came in short bursts that formed small clouds in front of my face. After maybe 20 minutes of quick hiking, Jen stopped suddenly. "Hank," she said in a shaky voice, "do you smell that?" The air had that same odd odor I'd noticed earlier, musty and metallic, like old pennies left in a damp basement. The smell seemed to surround us, as if we'd walked into an invisible cloud of it. Malcolm raised his hand, gesturing for silence. Then we heard a distant thump, followed by another. Maybe a branch falling. Maybe something heavy moving parallel to our path, just out of sight. We picked up speed, no longer trying to be quiet. At times my breath came so quickly I felt lightheaded, and I cursed under it, calling myself an idiot for walking in so far alone earlier. The forest seemed to press closer, the trees forming a tunnel around the narrow trail. Twice, I thought I heard movement in the underbrush beside us, but when I turned to look, nothing was visible. We reached the service road at last, the gravel surface and open sky above it feeling like salvation. Malcolm tried the radio again, getting better reception now that we were out of the deepest part of the forest. The static cleared, and a voice responded immediately, confirming that a sheriff's deputy and additional rangers were en route. While we waited, Jen asked me quietly, "You ever seen anything like that before?" I shook my head. Never, not even close. She nodded, as if that answered something deep inside her mind. "It wasn't natural," she said after a moment. "The way it moved, the proportions were all wrong." "I know," I replied, not wanting to discuss it further but unable to stop myself. "Did you see its hands? The fingers were too long and they moved independently like they each had extra joints." She shuddered visibly. "I don't want to think about it." Malcolm paced along the gravel road, rifle still at the ready, pointed at the tree line. None of us felt safe, despite being back in the open. Twice I thought I saw movement at the forest's edge. Just glimpses of that hulking silhouette shifting behind the foliage, staying hidden but keeping us in sight. "It's still watching us," I said to Malcolm as he passed me. He nodded. "I know, but it seems to prefer the cover of the trees, hasn't come into the open once." That observation should have been comforting. It wasn't. When more rangers and 2 sheriff's deputies showed up, we explained what we had found. The deputies, Cooper and Ramirez according to their name tags, gave us skeptical looks as if we were exaggerating. "So you're saying some kind of animal killed these hikers?" Cooper asked, adjusting his utility belt. "Bear, maybe? We get problem bears occasionally." "It wasn't a bear," Malcolm said flatly. "Come see for yourself." We led them back to the campsite, moving as a group this time. 6 rangers including us, 2 deputies, all armed except for Jen and me. The forest felt different with so many people. Less threatening, more like the familiar woods I'd patrolled for years. When they saw the bodies, the skepticism vanished from the deputies' faces. Cooper radioed for a medical examiner and crime scene technicians. Ramirez took photographs, her expression professional, but her eyes revealing her shock. "What did this?" she asked quietly, looking at Malcolm rather than me. Malcolm described what we'd seen. The figure in the trees, its strange proportions, the way it moved. He kept his account factual, clinical even, without speculation. The deputies listened without interrupting. "We need to organize a search," Cooper said when Malcolm finished. "Whatever did this could still be in the area, and there might be other campers out here." They formed a search team, rifles and shotguns ready, flashlights checked despite the daylight. The plan was to move in a coordinated grid pattern, covering the area around the campsite and then expanding outward. I offered to join them, but Malcolm pulled me aside. "Hank, you look rattled. I need you back at the command post. Coordinate communications." I wanted to argue, to prove I wasn't as shaken as I felt, but the truth was my legs felt weak and my hands hadn't stopped trembling. I nodded and returned to the service road where they'd established a makeshift command center around the vehicles. Jen stayed with me, setting up a communication log to track the search team's movements and findings. We worked in silence for a while, the routine tasks helping to calm my nerves. "Do you think they'll find it?" she asked eventually, her voice low so the medical examiner's team now arriving wouldn't hear. I considered the question. I don't know, it seemed aware, like it knew exactly when to move, when to hide. That's not normal animal behavior. She nodded, looking toward the forest. "Hank, what do you think it was?" I had been avoiding that question even in my own mind. "Something undocumented," I said finally. "Has to be. Nothing known in these mountains could do what we saw." The search continued for hours. The teams reported back regularly, describing strange tracks and broken branches higher up the slope from the campsite. They found claw marks on trees that didn't match any known predator, too widely spaced, too deep in the hardwood. And they found another torn sleeping bag from a different campsite reported missing earlier that week, suggesting this wasn't an isolated incident. But they never found it. The creature, whatever it was, had vanished into the vastness of the national park, leaving only its victims and a collection of unexplainable signs. As afternoon turned to evening, the search slowed. The sheriff's deputies decided to wait until morning to continue with a larger team and better equipment. The bodies were removed, placed in black bags, and carried out on stretchers to waiting vehicles. I climbed into my truck, refusing dinner when another ranger offered to share his sandwiches. My stomach felt like a knot, and the images from the day kept replaying in my mind. I wondered if I should quit, find work somewhere with concrete under my feet and walls around me at night. Malcolm tapped on my window, his face lined with fatigue. I rolled it down. "You did good work today, Hank," he said. "Go get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He seemed to understand, giving my shoulder a brief pat before walking away. I tried to replay the day in my head, searching for some rational explanation for what we'd seen. Maybe it was a bear with mange or some deformity. Maybe the stress of finding the bodies had made us perceive something ordinary as extraordinary. None of these explanations felt satisfactory. That night, I slept in a small ranger station near the park's eastern entrance. Jen and Malcolm were there too, but we kept to ourselves, each processing the day in our own way. The station had bunk beds, a small kitchen, and locks on the doors, all comforts that seemed suddenly vital. I stared at the ceiling, hearing every little noise outside. The wind in the trees sounded like breathing. The creak of the building settling resembled footsteps. Around midnight, I thought I heard a distant thud, followed by another, like something heavy moving just beyond the tree line. But maybe my mind was playing tricks, transforming ordinary sounds into threats. Sleep came eventually, broken and filled with dreams of running through endless forests, pursued by something I couldn't see but knew was there. I woke before dawn, drenched in sweat despite the cool air coming through the partially open window. At first light, the search teams assembled again, larger now with volunteers from the nearby town and additional officers from the county. Malcolm divided them into groups, assigning each a section of the forest to cover. Maps were distributed, radio frequencies checked, weapons loaded. This time I stayed behind as Malcolm had ordered, coordinating radio calls and marking search grid sections on a large map as they were cleared. The systematic approach should have been reassuring, methodical, thorough, professional. They combed the area around the campsite in an expanding spiral, finding more tracks, more of those strange scrape marks on trees, but nothing conclusive. No photographs, no definitive evidence of what had killed Nathan and Laura. Just a collection of anomalies that pointed towards something unknown. By mid-afternoon, the search parties had covered several square miles without success. It must have moved on, if it was ever really there at all. The official reports eventually settled on unknown predator, possibly a bear with unusual behavior patterns. The case remained open, assigned to a sheriff's detective who seemed skeptical of our descriptions, but professional enough not to dismiss them entirely. I know many people refused to believe what we reported, preferring to blame a bear or even human attackers. But those of us who had seen it knew better. The image of that creature, its wrong proportions, its watching posture, its impossible movements, stayed with me, surfacing in nightmares for years afterward. I never saw the creature again, though I remained a ranger for another 2 years before finally leaving the service. During those years, I never walked into the woods with the same easy confidence I'd once had. Every shadow might conceal something watching. Every unexplained sound might herald its return. The memory clung to me, making my pulse race whenever I thought about it. We never caught that thing, never found a track leading out. The trees swallowed it, leaving only questions and a lingering sense of wrongness. For months after the incident, I researched obsessively, looking for similar reports or scientific explanations. I spent hours on obscure internet forums where people shared encounters with unexplained phenomena in national parks. Most were clearly fabricated thrill stories, but a few contained details that resonated with what I'd seen. mentions of creatures with disproportionate limbs, unnatural movements, and that distinctive musty metallic smell. One thing online research confirmed was how the Great Smoky Mountains National Park harbors not just natural beauty, but also unexplained mysteries and disappearances. According to a spokesperson for Great Smoky Mountains National Park, the park averages about 100 search and rescue operations every year. Some cases are resolved quickly, while others become enduring mysteries. The mountains, while vast and beautiful, can be deep and unforgiving, with hundreds of thousands of miles of old-growth forest, where it doesn't take more than a moment for a life to be forever changed. This matched what I'd experienced that day in 2009, how quickly safety can turn to danger in those woods. I found several documented cases of strange disappearances in the park. The most famous is Dennis Martin, a 6-year-old boy who vanished during Father's Day weekend in 1969 while playing with other children at Spence Field on the Appalachian Trail. Despite what became the largest search in the history of the Smokies, covering 56 square miles with 1,400 volunteers, he was never found. The only traces were reportedly a sock and shoe. Looking at these disappearances, I couldn't help but connect them to my own experience. While I'd seen something tangible, a creature that defied explanation, others simply vanished without trace. I wondered if there was a connection. The internet held other stories too. In one account, a park ranger described being part of a search team looking for a missing family of 3. They found the campsite with no signs of a struggle, but discovered strange tracks leading away from it. This eerily paralleled what I'd found at Nathan and Laura's campsite. I found that hikers in the Smokies sometimes report that sensation of being watched, even without visible proof, or glimpsing something moving around the woods in the corner of your eye. The article was discussing Bigfoot legends, but the sensation described matched exactly what I'd felt that day. That overwhelming certainty of being observed by something just out of sight. The legends of the region include other unexplained phenomena. The Appalachian Trail that runs through the Great Smoky Mountains has accumulated its share of mysteries and legends, including reports of strange creatures. While some might be folklore, they often cluster around the same remote areas where actual disappearances have occurred. I sometimes wonder if what I saw that day was the same thing that has taken others in the park. If that's the case, I was fortunate. Malcolm's rifle may have saved our lives, or perhaps we simply weren't its target that day. In the years since my encounter, I've moved away from the mountains, working as an environmental consultant in Nashville. I don't hike alone anymore. I've told my story to a few trusted friends, but most people hear the sanitized version, that I left Ranger Service after witnessing a bear attack, which is what the official report eventually settled on. But I know what I saw. And on certain nights, when the wind moves through the trees outside my window in a particular way, I remember that shape watching us from the hillside, its head tilted in curiosity, its 2 long fingers hanging at its sides. And I wonder if it's still there in the deep forests of the Smokies, waiting for the next hiker who strays too far from the trail. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, but I can't help thinking that if I'd had a camera that day, or if smartphones with decent cameras had existed back then, maybe I'd have evidence of something science has yet to classify. Or maybe I just have a blurry photo of shadows and trees, another inconclusive piece in the puzzle of what lurks in those ancient mountains. Either way, the memory remains vivid. The bodies, the strange tracks, the creature watching from the trees, a moment when the familiar world tore open just enough to reveal something unexplainable beneath. I still get Christmas cards from Malcolm and Jen every year. None of us mention that day. But in Malcolm's last card, he included a news clipping about another disappearance in the park, with a single question mark drawn in the margin. Some things don't need explanation between people who've witnessed them together. If you ever find yourself hiking in the Great Smoky Mountains, stick to the marked trails, tell someone your route, and be back before dark. And if you ever feel that sensation of being watched from just beyond the tree line, don't dismiss it. In those ancient forests where mist clings to the valleys and shadows deepen too quickly at dusk, there are things that science has yet to catalog. Things that move quickly when they need to, but are patient enough to wait for decades between glimpses. After all, the mountains have been there for millions of years. Whatever lives among them has learned to be patient. My first night back on duty, and it already felt like the beginning of some small-town horror story. It was 1993, and I was parked on the side of a dirt road in Wainwright, North Dakota. Population 897. The kind of place where everyone knew your name and you couldn't get a burger without someone asking about your family. I loved the peace and quiet. That's why I never left. It's not like I was some big city cop looking to get out of the hustle. No, I just wanted things simple. Easy. My name's Terry Dillon, and I've been with the Wainwright Police Department for 11 years now. I've seen my fair share of bar fights and farm disputes, but nothing too serious. Some drunk guy who wants to throw hands because someone looked at his truck funny, or a farmer accusing his neighbor of stealing his chickens. The closest thing we had to excitement was the annual county fair, but that night was different. I got a call from dispatch around 11 p.m. Madeline, our dispatcher, sounded off, nervous even. The static of the radio couldn't hide the tremor in her voice. "Terry, we've got a situation," she said. "Report of a missing couple from the next town over, staying at a cabin in the woods." Missing people weren't exactly common in these parts, and tourists even less so. Why someone would pick North Dakota for a vacation, I'll never know. But hey, people are weird. "Cabins up by the old logging road," Madeline had said. "Apparently no one's seen or heard from them in 3 days. 3 days, I asked, squinting through the windshield into the darkness, watching as moths fluttered against the headlights. "And no one thought to report it earlier?" "Their friends got worried when they didn't come back," she replied, a crackle in her voice. "Figured they'd just lost track of time. You know how people are up there." I sighed and put the truck in drive. Wainwright's woods were dense, but not the kind of place you get lost in easily, unless, of course, you wandered too deep. Even then, you'd hit a road sooner or later. The idea that 2 people had just vanished didn't sit right with me. The logging road was about 15 miles outside of town, near where the old mill used to operate back in the 70s. I knew the area well. As a kid, I'd gone camping there with my dad, spent summers learning to fish and hunt in those woods. But something about that night, about the way the trees seemed to close in on me, set my nerves on edge. Maybe it was the weather, or maybe it was the idea of searching for a couple who might already be dead. The wind picked up as I drove, sending leaves skittering across the road. The radio crackled with static, and I reached over to adjust it, but the sound persisted. It wasn't just static. It was almost rhythmic, like breathing. I switched it off, preferring the silence to whatever that was. The trees grew denser as I approached the cabin area, their branches scraping against the sides of my cruiser. I'd driven this road hundreds of times, but tonight it seemed narrower, as if the forest was slowly reclaiming it inch by inch. My headlights caught a glimpse of something darting across the road, too fast to make out properly. I slammed on the brakes, the cruiser skidding slightly on the loose gravel. Nothing there, just shadows playing tricks. "Get it together, Terry," I muttered to myself, knuckles white against the steering wheel. The road forked ahead. Left led deeper into the woods, where the newer cabins were built. Right led to the older properties, the ones that had been there since the 60s. According to Madeline, our missing couple, Ben and Catherine Russell, had rented one of the older cabins, a place called Pine Ridge. I turned right, the cruiser bouncing over exposed roots and rocks. The headlights swept across the trees, creating monstrous shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. That feeling of being watched intensified, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus. It had been a long day, and exhaustion was making me jumpy. There were no monsters in these woods. At least, that's what I told myself. The cabin appeared ahead, a dark silhouette against the even darker forest. No lights, no movement, just an unnatural stillness that made my stomach knot. I pulled up slowly, killing the engine, but leaving the headlights on. They illuminated the front porch, casting long shadows across weathered wood. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out, the night air hitting me like a cold slap. Fall in North Dakota wasn't kind, especially after sundown. I pulled my jacket tighter and approached the cabin. The steps creaked under my weight, each one a warning I chose to ignore. The front window was dark, but I could see inside slightly, furniture, shadows, nothing moving. I knocked on the door, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the trees. Mr. and Mrs. Russell, Wainwright Police. Anyone home? Silence answered back. I knocked again, harder this time. Hello? Anyone in there? The wind picked up, whistling through the trees, carrying with it a sickly sweet smell that reminded me of roadkill left too long in the summer sun. I covered my nose, trying not to gag. Something wasn't right. Something was very wrong. I tried the door, unlocked. It swung open with a low groan, as if the cabin itself was in pain. The smell intensified, and I had to step back, taking a deep breath of fresh air before continuing. Police, anyone here? I called out, my voice sounding smaller than I intended. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating a scene that made my stomach turn. The furniture was upended, chairs broken, tables splintered. The walls were marked with long, deep gouges, as if something with massive claws had torn through them in a frenzy. But it was the floor that made me freeze. Dark stains spread across the wooden planks, leading toward the back door. Blood, a lot of it. I radioed Madeline. I'm at the Russell cabin, signs of violence. Blood on the floor. I'm going to check the perimeter, see if I can find them. Want me to send backup? Her voice crackled through the static. I hesitated. Protocol said yes, but backup meant Sheriff Cole, and he was probably 3 beers deep at the Rusty Nail by now. Besides, this was my first real case since coming back on duty. I wanted to handle it myself. Negative. I'll check it out first, let you know what I find. Be careful, Terry, she said, concern evident even through the poor connection. Something about this doesn't feel right. When does it ever? I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I ended the call and moved toward the back door, following the trail of blood. It led outside, into the woods. The night seemed to press in around me, a living, breathing thing watching my every move. I stepped outside, my flashlight beam catching something reflective near the tree line. Glass. I moved closer and realized it was a camera, broken and covered in blood. Next to it lay a man's shoe, torn and dirty. The trail of blood continued into the woods. I knew I should wait for backup, knew this was beyond what a small-town cop should handle alone. But I also knew that if the Russells were out there, injured and alone, every minute counted. I took a deep breath and stepped into the tree line, leaving the relative safety of the cabin behind. The forest swallowed me whole, darkness closing in from all sides. The only sound was my own breathing and the occasional snap of twigs beneath my feet. The blood trail was getting fresher. Whatever had happened to the Russells, it had happened recently. Very recently. Ahead, the trees thinned slightly, opening into a small clearing. My flashlight beam swept across it, and what I saw made me stop dead in my tracks. This wasn't just a case of missing tourists anymore. This was something else entirely. Something that would haunt me for years to come. When I pulled up to the cabin, the place was dark. No lights, no movement. The air was unnaturally still, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. I parked the cruiser and stepped out, the gravel crunching beneath my boots. I was unarmed. Town budget cuts meant no standard-issue firearms for us, and I'd always figured there wasn't much use for one anyway. Hell, the worst we dealt with was a rabid coyote or a drunk with a bad attitude. The cabin door was ajar, which immediately set off alarms in my head. People don't just leave their doors open out here. It's asking for trouble. Animals, thieves, you name it. I pulled my flashlight from my belt and stepped inside. The cabin smelled like damp wood and mildew, the kind of scent that sticks to your clothes. There was no sign of a struggle, but something was off. The furniture was in place. Dishes were on the table, but it felt abandoned, like they'd just gotten up and left without a second thought. Their luggage was still in the corner, untouched. I did a quick sweep of the place, no blood, no broken windows, no signs of foul play. But the longer I stayed inside, the heavier the air seemed to get, like the cabin itself was pushing me out. I shook it off and headed back outside to check the surrounding area. That's when I saw it. Deep, irregular scratches in the dirt leading from the side of the cabin to the woods. They weren't the kind of marks an animal makes. No, these were deliberate. I followed the trail cautiously, my flashlight cutting through the thickening trees. The further I went, the more uneasy I became. My mind raced with explanations, but none of them made sense. The scratches continued deeper into the woods, disappearing into the brush. About 20 minutes in, I found what I was looking for, Or rather, what I wasn't looking for. The couple. Or at least, what was left of them. Their bodies were mauled, limbs twisted at unnatural angles, blood soaked into the earth, pooling in dark, sticky patches. The worst part wasn't the sight, though. It was the realization that whatever had done this wasn't finished. The bodies weren't scattered like a wild animal would leave them. No, it was as if something had been interrupted in the middle of its work. There were more of those same scratches near the bodies, dragging toward the nearby stream. I knelt down, examining the ground around them. Whoever or whatever had done this wasn't just killing, it was collecting. I ran my hand through my hair, trying to think, to make sense of the mess in front of me. I didn't have long to ponder. Behind me there was a sound, a low, heavy rustling in the trees. I turned, my flashlight darting between the trunks. The air had changed, thicker, with a stench that hit my nose like a punch. Decay, sweat, something old and rotting. And then I saw it. The thing moved through the trees with an unnatural speed, like it was dragging itself on all fours but still managing to keep pace with me. It was hard to see clearly, but from what I caught in the light, it wasn't anything I'd ever seen in these parts. It was massive, bigger than any animal I knew of, and its body seemed twisted, wrong. Like someone had taken the anatomy of a bear and a human and mashed them together in the worst possible way. But it wasn't a bear. It couldn't be. I could feel its eyes on me. I didn't need to see them. You know that gut feeling when you're being watched? Multiply that by 100, and it still wouldn't come close to what I felt. I ran. I'm not ashamed to say it. Whatever that thing was, I knew I didn't stand a chance. I could hear it behind me, the snapping of branches, the thudding of its weight on the forest floor, the sound of its breath, heavy, labored, grew closer with every step. I wasn't going to make it to the cruiser, not at this rate. My foot caught a root and I went down hard, face first, into the dirt. Pain shot through my ankle as I scrambled to get up, but it was too late. It was on me. I felt the pressure first, a heavy weight that pinned me to the ground. My flashlight rolled away, the beam flickering against the trees. I braced for the worst. Then it stopped. The pressure lifted and the sound of rustling faded. I lay there, breathing hard, trying to process what had just happened. Slowly, I pushed myself up, wincing at the pain in my leg. My flashlight was still flickering in the distance, casting weak light on the ground. I crawled over, grabbing it and spinning around to see if the thing was still there. It wasn't, but something else was. At first I thought it was another body, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely, something human, but not. It was hunched over, pale skin stretched tight across bones. Long matted hair hung in front of its face, but the thing wasn't moving. I edged closer, my heart pounding. It looked like a person, but it was all wrong. Too thin, too long-limbed, and it reeked of death. I backed away, shaking, trying to figure out what to do next when I heard another sound. This time, it was a voice, a raspy, choking laugh. The thing in front of me wasn't dead, not yet. I watched in horror as it started to rise, its joints cracking like old wood. That's when I realized. The scratches, the bodies, they weren't just the work of some animal. This thing, it had been hunting and I'd just interrupted its meal. I don't remember running back to the cruiser. I don't remember driving back to town. All I know is I made it, barely. The next morning when I reported what happened, no one questioned me. They didn't ask for details, didn't send anyone up to the cabin. It was like they already knew, like they'd been waiting for this to happen. And as I sat in the station trying to piece it all together, I realized something. Whatever that thing was, whatever I'd seen, it wasn't going to stop. They didn't disappear, though. The bodies. They were real. Just like that thing, whatever it was. As I sat at my desk, hands still shaking, I tried to write up my report. How do you describe something you can barely comprehend? How do you put into words a horror that defies explanation? The station was quiet that morning. Most of the staff hadn't arrived yet, and I was grateful for the solitude. I needed time to process, to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. I jumped at the sound of the door opening. Sheriff Emmett Reed walked in, his face grim. "Morning, Terry," he said, hanging up his hat. "Heard you had quite a night." I nodded, not trusting my voice just yet. "Madeline filled me in," he continued, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Said you found those missing tourists, or what was left of them." "Yes, sir," I managed, clearing my throat. It was, I've never seen anything like it. Reed sat down across from me, his weathered face unreadable. Tell me exactly what you saw out there. I recounted the events as best I could, trying to stick to the facts. The open cabin door, the scratches, the bodies, the creature. With each word, I expected him to interrupt, to call me crazy or drunk, but he just listened, nodding occasionally, his expression growing darker. When I finished, he sat back, running a hand through his thinning gray hair. You're not the first, you know, sir, to see it, whatever it is. He lowered his voice, though we were alone. This town's got history, Terry. Old history. Things no one talks about. A chill ran through me. What kind of things? Reed stood up, moving to the window. Outside, Wainwright was waking up, people going about their day, oblivious to the horror lurking in the woods. Stories, legends, people going missing over the years, bodies found, not whole. He turned back to me. Most folks dismiss it as animal attacks, bears, wolves. But those of us who've been here long enough, we know better. Why hasn't anyone done something, I asked, anger rising in my chest. If people are dying, because we can't prove it, Reed cut me off. Because every time someone tries to hunt it down, they either come back empty-handed or they don't come back at all. So we just let it keep killing. We do what we can, Terry. We warn people to stay out of those woods. We patrol the areas we know are safe. But that thing, it's been here longer than any of us, and it's not going anywhere. I couldn't accept that. I wouldn't. We need to go back out there, get those bodies, get evidence. Reed's expression hardened. No one's going back out there. Not today, not until we figure out a plan. But that's an order, Deputy. His tone left no room for argument. I'm not losing any more people to that thing. I sat there, fuming, as Reed walked away. How many people had died because of this town's secrets? How many more would die if we did nothing? The day dragged on, each minute feeling like an hour. I couldn't focus on paperwork, couldn't eat the sandwich Madeline brought me. All I could think about was what I'd seen in those woods, and what might still be out there. As evening approached, Reed called me into his office. He looked tired, older than his 60 years. I've been thinking about what you said, he began, gesturing for me to sit. About going back out there. I nodded, hope rising. I'm putting together a team. Small, quiet, no one outside the department needs to know. He fixed me with a stern look. But we do this my way, understand? No heroes, no lone wolves. We go in prepared, or we don't go in at all. Yes, sir, I agreed, relieved. When? Tomorrow, dawn. We'll meet here, gear up, and head out. He pushed a file across the desk. In the meantime, I want you to look through this. I opened the file to find old reports, some yellowed with age, missing persons, animal attacks, strange sightings dating back decades. Do your homework, Terry, Reed said quietly. Know what we're up against. I spent the night at the station poring over the files. The pattern was clear. Every few years, disappearances spiked, always in the same area, always explained away as accidents or animal attacks. Some reports included witness statements describing a creature much like what I'd seen, large, malformed, moving with unnatural speed. The descriptions varied in detail, but the terror in the words was consistent. One report from 1976 caught my attention. A hunter named Joseph Blackstone had encountered the creature and managed to wound it before escaping. His description was more detailed than most, a bipedal figure, over 7 feet tall, with elongated limbs and a face that was almost human, but twisted by something inhuman. Blackstone had led a group of men back to hunt the creature, but they found nothing. 2 weeks later, Blackstone was found dead in his home, his body mutilated in the same manner as the victims in the woods. The message was clear. This thing could follow you home. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, Reed was shaking me awake. Dawn light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room. Time to go, he said simply. Outside, 3 other officers waited by a pair of cruisers. Ricky Walsh, a young deputy who'd only been with us a year. Hank Peterson, an old-timer who'd been Reed's partner back in the day. And Lucy Keller, our firearms specialist. We geared up in silence, checking weapons and radios. Reed had brought shotguns, rifles, even an old military-issue flare gun. This wasn't a search party. It was a hunting party. We stay together, Reed instructed as we loaded into the vehicles. No one wanders off no matter what. If you see something, you call it out. If I say run, you run. No questions, no hesitation. Clear? We all nodded, the gravity of the situation settling over us like a shroud. The drive to the logging road was tense, no one speaking. I directed them to the cabin, my stomach nodding as we approached. In the daylight, the place looked almost ordinary, just another neglected vacation rental. But the scratches were still there, leading into the woods. That's our trail, I said, pointing. Reed nodded, his face grim. Let's go get those bodies then. Proof that something's out there. We moved into the forest in formation, Reed and Peterson leading, Lucy and Ricky on the flanks, me in the center. The woods felt different in the daylight, less oppressive, but no less dangerous. I led them to where I'd found the bodies, but when we reached the spot, there was nothing there. No corpses, no blood, not even disturbed earth. It was as if the scene I'd witnessed had been wiped clean. I don't understand, I said, looking around frantically. They were right here. I swear it. Reed knelt, examining the ground. I believe you, Terry. Look. He pointed to faint drag marks leading deeper into the woods, away from the stream. It moved them, Peterson said quietly. Hid its kills. A chill ran through the group. This wasn't a mindless animal. This was something that understood the concept of evidence. We follow the trail, Reed decided after a moment's consideration. Carefully. We tracked the drag marks further into the forest, where the trees grew so dense that the sunlight barely penetrated. The air grew colder, damper, filled with the smell of rot. And then we found them. Not just the couple I'd seen, but others. Many others. A grotesque collection of bodies in various states of decay, piled in a ravine like discarded trash. Some were fresh, some were little more than bones. Ricky turned away, retching. Lucy crossed herself, muttering a prayer. Peterson just stared, his face ashen. Jesus, Reed breathed. How long has this been going on? A rustling sound came from above us, branches creaking under weight. We all looked up, weapons raised, and there it was, perched on a thick branch, watching us. In the daylight, I could see it clearly now. Its skin was a mottled gray, stretched over a frame too large for it. Its face was the worst part, features almost human but distorted, like a reflection in troubled water. Its eyes, though, its eyes were intelligent, aware, and they were fixed on me. For a moment, no one moved. Then, without warning, it leapt down, landing with inhuman grace despite its bulk. Reed fired first, the shotgun blast echoing through the trees. The creature staggered but didn't fall. Run! Reed shouted, firing again, but it was too late. The thing moved with terrifying speed, knocking Peterson aside like he was nothing. Lucy got off 2 shots before it reached her, its clawed hand tearing across her chest. She fell, screaming. Ricky and I pulled her back, firing as we retreated. The creature advanced, seemingly unfazed by the bullets. Reed stood his ground, emptying his shotgun into the beast. It paused, looking down at the wounds in its chest. Then it looked up at Reed, and I swear it smiled. What happened next will stay with me forever. The creature lunged, and Reed was gone, dragged into the trees with a speed that defied belief. His scream cut off abruptly, replaced by a wet, tearing sound that made my stomach turn. Go, go, I shouted, helping Ricky drag Lucy back toward the cabin. Peterson was right behind us, firing blindly into the trees. We didn't make it far before it came for us again. A blur of movement, and Peterson was down, clutching at his throat, blood spurting between his fingers. Ricky and I managed to get Lucy to the cruisers, but when I turned back to help Peterson, he was gone. Just a trail of blood leading into the darkness. We sped back to town, Lucy bleeding out in the back seat, Ricky white-knuckled at the wheel. I radioed ahead, telling them to prepare for casualties, to call in help from the neighboring counties. But I knew even then that it wouldn't be enough. We'd poked the beast, and now it was coming for us. All of us. I spent the next few days on edge, pacing the station, the events replaying in my mind like a broken record. The town was quiet. The usual chatter among the locals stifled as if everyone sensed the unease hanging in the air. I tried to focus on routine tasks, filing reports, answering phone calls. But my thoughts kept drifting back to the cabin and the thing lurking in the woods. The official story was that Sheriff Reed and Deputy Peterson had been killed in an animal attack while investigating a missing persons case. Lucy was in the hospital 2 towns over, fighting for her life. The wounds she'd sustained were unlike anything the doctors had seen before. Not quite bear, not quite wolf. Something else. Ricky had quit the force the day after, packed up his truck, and left town without saying goodbye. I couldn't blame him. If I had anywhere else to go, I might have done the same. With Reed gone, I was acting sheriff now, at least until the county could send someone to replace him. The responsibility weighed on me like a physical thing, pressing down on my shoulders, making it hard to breathe. One night, while poring over the few leads we had on the missing couple, Madeline called me into the break room. Her expression was grave. "Terry, you need to see this." She handed me a newspaper, the headline bold and jarring: "Mysterious disappearances in North Dakota. Locals fear the worst." As I read through the article, my heart sank. It detailed reports of hikers gone missing, strange noises in the woods, and sightings of an unidentifiable creature. A sense of dread settled over me. This was bigger than I thought. The thing wasn't just a local legend. It was real, and it was actively hunting. "Are we going to do something about this?" I asked, my voice low. Madeline shrugged, glancing at the floor. "The county says there's nothing to worry about, just local lore. You know how people get." "But we know what we saw," I insisted. "People are disappearing, and we're sitting on our hands." She sighed. "What do you want me to do? It's just us out here. If we start a panic, who knows what'll happen?" I left the break room feeling frustrated. I needed to do something. But what? I couldn't exactly go out there alone, not after what happened last time. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me. That evening, unable to sleep, I drove back to the logging road, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a knife. This time, I brought a flashlight and a shovel. If I was going to prove to myself and to anyone else that something was out there, I needed more than just my word. As I parked the cruiser and walked toward the cabin, the familiar chill returned, a mix of anticipation and dread gnawing at my stomach. I approached cautiously, flashlight sweeping over the ground. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. I reached the cabin and, sure enough, the scratches were still there. They led me further into the woods, deeper than I had ventured before. Each step felt like a countdown, a silent agreement with fate. I followed the trail, my heart racing. The trees closed in around me, and I felt that sense of being watched again. I stopped and listened, the silence deafening. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it, a faint wheezing breath, closer than before. I quickly ducked behind a tree, pressing myself against the rough bark. My mind raced, desperate for a plan. Suddenly the breathing stopped. I waited, tension coiling in my muscles. After a few moments, I stepped out cautiously and continued following the trail. It led me to a clearing, and what I found made my stomach drop. There, amidst the underbrush, were more bodies. Not just the couple. There were hikers, locals, people I recognized from town. Their faces were twisted in fear, and it was clear they hadn't died peacefully. It was a graveyard of lost souls, a collection of horrors that screamed for justice. I took a step back, but the crunch of leaves beneath my boot gave me away. The creature emerged from the shadows, its massive frame stepping into the moonlight. This time I could see it clearly. The beast stood on 2 legs, but its body was still hunched over, its limbs too long, fingers ending in claws that glistened with dark, congealed blood. It locked onto me, and I felt that gut-wrenching fear shoot through me. This was it. No turning back. With every ounce of adrenaline I had left, I ran. I darted through the trees, zigzagging as I went, praying I could lose it. Behind me, I could hear it crashing through the underbrush, its heavy footsteps thudding against the ground like a war drum. I burst through the clearing, spotting my cruiser in the distance. I could make it. I could. A sudden pain shot through my ankle as I tripped over a root. I tumbled to the ground, gasping. The creature was almost upon me. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging as I threw myself into the car, fumbling with the keys. My hands shook violently, but I managed to get the engine roaring to life just as it reached me. I slammed the gas pedal, the tires screeching as I tore down the dirt road, glancing in the rearview mirror. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, but it didn't chase after me. It just watched, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlight, waiting for me to come back. The rest of that night was a blur. I called in the county sheriff, but he dismissed my claims, chalking it up to a wild imagination. No one believed me, not even Madeline. I spent hours trying to convince them, to show them the evidence, but they brushed me off. Days turned into weeks. I felt the grip of paranoia tightening around me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I began to hear whispers among the townsfolk about the disappearances, the legends growing like weeds. They were convinced it was just an animal, just a story. But I knew better. I'd seen it with my own eyes, felt its breath on my skin, heard the wet sound of it tearing through flesh. At night, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it knew where I lived, if it was watching my house, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of branches outside my window sent my heart racing. I tried to find solace in work, but even that was tainted now. Every missing person report, every strange noise complaint, reminded me of what lurked in the woods. The county sent a new sheriff, a man named Jack Rivera, who looked at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. He'd heard the stories, of course. Everyone had. But he didn't believe them, didn't want to believe them. "Look, Dylan," he said during our first meeting. "I get it. You've been through a trauma. Losing Reed and Peterson like that, it's enough to mess with anyone's head. I know what I saw," I insisted, trying to keep my voice steady. Rivera sighed, leaning back in Reed's old chair. It would always be Reed's chair to me. "What you think you saw. The mind plays tricks, especially under stress. You think I imagined it? That I imagined all those bodies? I think you saw a bear attack and your brain filled in the gaps. It happens." I wanted to argue, to make him understand, but I could see it was pointless. He'd made up his mind before he even arrived in Wainwright, so I retreated, did my job, kept my head down, but I didn't stop watching, waiting. I knew it would happen again, it was just a matter of time. And sure enough, 3 weeks after Rivera took over, the calls started coming in again. Hikers seeing something strange in the woods, campers hearing noises at night, a family reporting claw marks on the side of their car after parking near the logging road. Rivera dismissed them all, attributing them to bears, teenagers playing pranks, or people getting caught up in local superstitions. But I kept a record, marking each incident on a map in my apartment. A pattern was forming, a circle closing in on the town itself. One morning I received a call from Madeline, her voice tight with worry. "Terry, we've got another missing person. Brianna Carson, 17, didn't come home from school yesterday." My heart sank. I knew Brianna. She was a quiet kid, smart, kept to herself, not the type to run away. "Where was she last seen?" "Walking home along the edge of town, where the woods start." I felt a chill run through me. "I'll take it." "Rivera says to wait." "I don't care what Rivera says. This is my case." I hung up before she could argue, grabbing my jacket and keys. Outside, the sky was overcast, threatening rain. Perfect hunting weather. I drove to the Carson house first, talked to Brianna's parents. They were frantic, eyes red from crying, clutching her photo like a lifeline. I promised to find her, though I knew in my gut it might already be too late. Her usual route home took her past the eastern edge of town, where the forest crept close to the backyards of the outermost houses. I walked the path slowly, scanning the ground for any sign of disturbance. At the point where the sidewalk ended and a dirt path continued into the trees, I found it. A single shoe, small, clearly belonging to a teenage girl. And beside it, those now familiar scratches in the earth. My radio crackled. "Dylan, where are you?" Rivera's voice irritated. "I'm following a lead on the Carson girl," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "I told Madeline to have you wait for me." "Didn't have time. I think I've found something." I described the shoe but deliberately left out the scratches. He wouldn't understand, wouldn't believe me. "Stay put. I'm sending Gomez to back you up." "Can't wait. The trail's fresh, and it's going to rain soon." I switched off the radio before he could respond. I knew I was probably ending my career, but at that moment, I didn't care. Finding Brianna was all that mattered. I followed the trail into the woods, moving as quietly as I could. This time, I was armed, my personal sidearm tucked into my belt. If I encountered the creature again, I wouldn't be defenseless. The path led deeper into the forest, away from town, toward a part of the woods I wasn't familiar with. The trees grew denser, older, their twisted branches blocking out what little daylight filtered through the clouds. After about 20 minutes of tracking, I heard something, a soft whimpering, barely audible over the rustle of leaves. I froze, listening intently. There it was again, the sound of someone in pain trying not to make noise. I moved toward the sound, stepping carefully to avoid alerting whatever might be nearby. In a small depression between two large boulders, I found her. Brianna was curled up, shivering, her clothes torn and dirty. Her leg was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. When she saw me, her eyes widened in terror. "It's okay," I whispered, kneeling beside her. "I'm here to help. Deputy Dillon, remember? We met at the school career day." Recognition flickered in her eyes, followed by relief. "It's out there," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "I saw it. It chased me. I fell. My leg." "I know," I said, glancing around nervously. "We need to get you out of here. Can you move at all?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It comes back. Every few hours. Watches me like it's waiting for something." My blood ran cold. I'd been lucky before, but carrying an injured girl through the woods would slow me down considerably. We'd be easy prey. "I'm going to call for help," I told her, pulling out my radio. "We'll get you home." But the radio was dead, just static. We were too deep in the woods, or something was interfering with the signal. "Okay, new plan," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "I'm going to carry you. It'll hurt, and I need you to be as quiet as possible. Can you do that?" Brianna nodded, her face pale but determined. I scooped her up as gently as I could, but she still gasped in pain as her broken leg shifted. She bit down on her lip, drawing blood, but didn't scream. "Brave girl," I murmured, starting back the way I'd come. "Just a little longer, and you'll be safe." We made slow progress, each step careful, measured. I kept my ears strained for any sound that might indicate we weren't alone, but the forest was eerily quiet. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our breathing and the occasional whimper from Brianna when I jostled her too much. The light was fading fast, the approaching storm making dusk come early. I picked up the pace, knowing we needed to reach open ground before darkness fell completely. We were maybe halfway back to town when I heard it, a low, rumbling growl somewhere to our left. Brianna tensed in my arms, her eyes wide with terror. "Don't move," I whispered, setting her down behind a fallen tree. "Stay here. Don't make a sound." I drew my gun, moving away from her hiding spot, trying to draw attention to myself. If the creature was hunting, I wanted it to follow me, not the injured girl. The growl came again, closer this time. I turned slowly, scanning the trees, and froze. It stood about 20 yards away, partially hidden by the undergrowth. In the dimming light, it looked even more monstrous, a hulking silhouette with too many angles, its head cocked to one side as it watched me. I raised my gun but hesitated. The previous encounters had shown that bullets might not be effective, and if I fired and missed or merely wounded it, I might bring its full fury down on us. For a long moment we stared at each other, hunter and prey, though I wasn't sure which was which anymore. Then, slowly, deliberately, it began to move toward me, each step measured, predatory. I backed away, keeping the gun trained on it, trying to lead it further from Brianna. It followed, matching my pace, never taking its eyes off me. The standoff couldn't last. Eventually I'd trip, or it would lunge, or night would fall completely. I needed to end this, one way or another. I fired. The shot echoed through the trees, startling a flock of crows into flight. The creature staggered, a dark stain spreading across its chest, but it didn't fall. Instead, it let out a roar that seemed to shake the very air, a sound of rage and hunger and something else, something almost human. It charged. I emptied the gun, each shot finding its mark, but still it came, moving with that unnatural speed. I turned to run, but it was too late. It was on me, its weight driving me to the ground, crushing the breath from my lungs. I felt its hot breath on my neck, smelled the rot and decay that clung to it. This was it. This was how I died, torn apart in the woods like so many others. But the killing blow never came. Instead, the creature's head snapped up, its attention drawn to something else. A new sound. Voices, shouting, the beam of flashlights cutting through the trees. The search party. Rivera must have followed me despite my radio silence. The creature hesitated, torn between finishing me and fleeing from the approaching humans. For a moment, its face was inches from mine, and I saw something in its eyes that chilled me more than its appearance ever could. Recognition, calculation, intelligence. Then it was gone, melting into the shadows with a speed that belied its size, leaving me gasping on the forest floor. Minutes later, Rivera and 2 deputies burst into the clearing, guns drawn, flashlights sweeping wildly. "Dylan, what the hell happened? We heard shots." I sat up slowly, wincing at the pain in my ribs. "The girl," I managed. "Brianna. She's behind that fallen tree, broken leg. Get her first." As they rushed to help Brianna, I stared into the darkness where the creature had vanished. It could have killed me, should have killed me, but it hadn't. Why? The question haunted me as we made our way back to town, Brianna safely strapped to a stretcher, me limping alongside. She wouldn't talk about what had happened, wouldn't describe what had chased her. But her eyes said it all, the same haunted look I saw in the mirror every morning. Rivera cornered me at the hospital while the doctors were setting Brianna's leg. "You disobeyed a direct order," he began, his face tight with anger. "Went off alone. Nearly got yourself killed." "I found her, didn't I?" I cut in. "She's alive because I didn't wait." "You're lucky you're both alive. What were you thinking going into those woods without backup?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and decided to take a chance. I was thinking that there's something in those woods that's been killing people for decades, and no one wants to admit it. Rivera's expression shifted, the anger fading to something more complex. "The bear." "It's not a bear," I said firmly. "You know it, I know it, everyone in this town knows it. They're just too scared to say it out loud." He was silent for a long moment, then sighed, rubbing his face. "What do you want me to do, Dylan? Put out an APB on a monster? Tell people to lock their doors because some creature from a horror movie is coming for them? I want you to protect this town. That's our job. And how do we do that? Against something like whatever you think is out there?" I didn't have an answer for him. Not yet. But as I walked home that night, the questions kept circling in my mind. What was it? Why had it spared me? How many more would die before someone took action? I looked up at the stars, barely visible through the gathering clouds, and made a promise to myself. I would find answers. I would find a way to stop it, even if it cost me everything. That evening, unable to sleep, I drove back to the logging road, the headlights cutting through the darkness like a knife. This time I brought a flashlight and a shovel. If I was going to prove to myself and to anyone else that something was out there, I needed more than just my word. As I parked the cruiser and walked toward the cabin, the familiar chill returned, a mix of anticipation and dread gnawing at my stomach. I approached cautiously, flashlight sweeping over the ground. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig underfoot. I reached the cabin and, sure enough, the scratches were still there. They led me further into the woods, deeper than I had ventured before. Each step felt like a countdown, a silent agreement with fate. I followed the trail, my heart racing. The trees closed in around me, and I felt that sense of being watched again. I stopped and listened, the silence deafening. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard it. A faint, wheezing breath, closer than before. I quickly ducked behind a tree, pressing myself against the rough bark. My mind raced, desperate for a plan. Suddenly, the breathing stopped. I waited, tension coiling in my muscles. After a few moments, I stepped out cautiously and continued following the trail. It led me to a clearing, and what I found made my stomach drop. There, amidst the underbrush, were more bodies. Not just the couple. There were hikers, locals, people I recognized from town. Their faces were twisted in fear, and it was clear they hadn't died peacefully. It was a graveyard of lost souls, a collection of horrors that screamed for justice. I took a step back, but the crunch of leaves beneath my boot gave me away. The creature emerged from the shadows, its massive frame stepping into the moonlight. This time I could see it clearly. The beast stood on two legs, but its body was still hunched over, its limbs too long, fingers ending in claws that glistened with dark, congealed blood. It locked onto me, and I felt that gut-wrenching fear shoot through me. This was it. No turning back. With every ounce of adrenaline I had left, I ran. I darted through the trees, zigzagging as I went, praying I could lose it. Behind me I could hear it crashing through the underbrush, its heavy footsteps thudding against the ground like a war drum. I burst through the clearing, spotting my cruiser in the distance. I could make it. I could. A sudden pain shot through my ankle as I tripped over a root. I tumbled to the ground, gasping. The creature was almost upon me. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging as I threw myself into the car, fumbling with the keys. My hands shook violently, but I managed to get the engine roaring to life just as it reached me. I slammed the gas pedal, the tires screeching as I tore down the dirt road, glancing in the rearview mirror. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, but it didn't chase after me. It just watched, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlight, waiting for me to come back. The rest of that night was a blur. I called in the sheriff, but he dismissed my claims, chalking it up to a wild imagination. No one believed me, not even Madeline. I spent hours trying to convince them, to show them the evidence, but they brushed me off. Days turned into weeks. I felt the grip of paranoia tightening around me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I began to hear whispers among the townsfolk about the disappearances, the legends growing like weeds. They were convinced it was just an animal, just a story. Then one night I caught a break. Madeline got a call about another missing person, a local teen who'd been hiking alone. I bolted into action, determined to find her before it was too late. The sheriff finally relented, sending a small team with me to the last known location. As we hiked into the woods, I led the way, heart pounding with each step. But this time the air felt different, thick with tension, pregnant with dread. When we reached the clearing, I froze. The bodies were gone. All that remained were faint stains on the ground, evidence of what had happened. We searched for hours, calling out the teen's name, but there was no response, just the quiet rustling of the forest. As we prepared to turn back, I caught sight of something, a flash of white through the trees. "Over there," I yelled, rushing toward it. The others followed, hearts pounding with hope. We stumbled into another clearing, and there she was, huddled against a tree, shaking and wide-eyed. I rushed over, kneeling beside her. "It's okay. You're safe now," I assured her, even though I wasn't so sure. But before I could get her out, the air shifted again. That same suffocating feeling returned, and we were surrounded. The creature emerged from the trees, dragging something behind it, a body. A primal scream tore through the night. It lunged at us, and I could feel the world closing in. I had to protect the girl. The sheriff shouted orders, but they were lost in the chaos as we scrambled for cover. The creature was faster, stronger, and it caught one of my colleagues before we could even react. The screams echoed through the trees, drowning out everything else. In that moment of pure adrenaline, I remembered the shovel I'd brought from the cruiser. I grabbed it from the ground where I'd dropped it earlier and raced toward the thing, my heart pounding in my ears. With every ounce of strength, I swung the shovel, catching the creature across its side. It let out a horrible screech, the sound reverberating in my bones. But it wasn't enough. It turned, swiping at me with a claw that felt like a freight train. I ducked just in time, feeling the wind from its swipe as it roared in fury. I realized then that this was my chance. I couldn't let fear stop me. I lunged again, the shovel connecting with its neck. The creature staggered, but I pressed on, adrenaline pushing me beyond my limits. With a final desperate swing, I struck its head. It fell to the ground, motionless, the body crumpling in on itself. I stood there, panting, the girl staring at me wide-eyed. Then came the quiet. We'd done it. I looked around, catching the terrified expressions of my colleagues as they realized what had just happened. The proof of what had haunted our town lay before us. The aftermath was swift. The sheriff ordered a full investigation, though we knew there would be whispers about what we found. There would always be skeptics, always be those who doubted. But I didn't care. I had seen it with my own eyes, and the evidence was there for anyone willing to look. We retrieved the bodies of the victims, laying them to rest while the town struggled to come to terms with the horror lurking in the woods. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, so did the stories. New legends sprung up, but the truth remained hidden beneath the surface. A shadow, just out of reach. After the encounter, I found myself drawn to the town library, spending hours in the local history section. If this thing had been hunting in our woods for decades, there had to be records, stories, something that could help me understand what we were dealing with. The librarian, an elderly woman named Ruth, watched me with curious eyes as I piled books on North Dakota folklore and local history on the table. "Looking for something specific, Deputy?" she asked, her voice soft but knowing. I hesitated, then decided to take a chance. Information about incidents in the woods, disappearances, strange sightings. Ruth's expression shifted, a shadow passing over her face. "You've seen it, haven't you?" My heart skipped a beat. "Seen what?" She glanced around, making sure we were alone, then leaned closer. "The Watcher. That's what my grandmother called it. Been here since before the town was founded." "What do you know about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not much, just stories. Old tales passed down." She straightened up, adjusting her glasses. "Wait here." She disappeared into the back room, returning a few minutes later with a worn leather journal. "This belonged to James Wainwright, the town's founder. Most folks think he just kept records of land purchases and such, but there's more. Things the Historical Society doesn't include in their displays." I took the journal carefully, feeling the weight of history in my hands. "Thank you." "Be careful, Deputy," Ruth warned, her eyes serious. "Some truths are best left buried." Back at my apartment, I pored over the journal, deciphering Wainwright's cramped handwriting by lamplight. Most of it was indeed mundane: crop yields, weather patterns, births and deaths. But scattered throughout were entries that made my blood run cold. April 15th, 1872. 3 men missing after hunting expedition. Edwards claims to have seen something in the trees. Not bear, not wolf, something else. The men still not found. June 3rd, 1872. Another disappearance. Young woman from the Miller homestead. Found her clothes by the creek, torn to shreds. No body. Edwards swears it's the same creature. July 29th, 1872. Edwards dead. Found him in his cabin, torn apart. Door locked from inside. Whatever did this isn't natural. The entries continued, spanning decades. Wainwright documented each incident meticulously, though his tone grew increasingly desperate as the years passed. In one of the final entries, dated just before his death, he wrote, "December 12th, 1901. I have failed this town. I brought them here knowing what lurked in these woods. I thought we could contain it, drive it away. I was wrong. It has only grown stronger, feeding on our fear as much as our flesh. May God forgive me for what I've done." What had Wainwright done? What did he know about the creature that he took to his grave? The next day, I sought out the oldest resident of Wainwright, a man named Gerald Holbrook. At 95, he'd seen more of the town's history than anyone alive. I found him on his porch, smoking a pipe, his rheumy eyes fixed on the distant tree line. "Mr. Holbrook," I greeted him. "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "About the thing in the woods, I reckon." I sat down, surprised. "How did you—" "News travels fast in a small town. Heard you've been asking around, digging up old stories." He tapped his pipe against the porch railing. "Saw it myself once. Back in '43, before I shipped out for the war, didn't know what it was then. Still don't." "But you believe it's real?" Gerald laughed, a dry sound like leaves rustling. "Real as you and me. Been taking folks from these parts for generations. Comes and goes in cycles. Few years of peace, then it gets hungry again. Has anyone ever tried to stop it? To hunt it down?" His expression darkened. "Many have tried. Few have lived to tell about it." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There was a group, back in the '50s. Local men, veterans mostly, called themselves the Watchers. They knew about it, tracked it, tried to keep people safe. What happened to them? One by one, they disappeared. Last one was my friend, Earl Simmons. Found him in the woods, or what was left of him. After that, no one wanted to talk about it anymore. Easier to blame bears or wolves or drifters passing through. I digested this information, the pieces starting to come together. Do you think it can be killed? Gerald studied me for a long moment. Maybe. But ask yourself this, deputy. What happens if you wound it, but don't kill it? What happens if you make it angry? The question haunted me as I continued my research. I delved into other towns' records, looking for similar patterns of disappearances and deaths. I contacted wildlife experts, described the creature without mentioning the supernatural aspects, asked if any known animal could match the description. The answers were always the same. Nothing in North American wildlife fit the profile. Not even the most aggressive bear or wolf would stalk humans so deliberately, so intelligently. One night, frustrated by the lack of concrete information, I drove to the County Historical Society, hoping their archives might contain something Wainwright's journal had missed. The building was closed, but I had a key, one of the perks of being law enforcement in a small town. I let myself in, flipping on the lights and making my way to the records room. Hours passed as I sifted through dusty boxes of photographs, letters, and newspaper clippings. Most were mundane: harvest festivals, church picnics, the occasional wedding or funeral. Then I found it, in a box labeled simply, Miscellaneous, 1890-1910. A faded photograph of 5 men standing in front of the old mill. 4 were smiling, dressed in their Sunday best. But the 5th, standing slightly apart from the others, caught my attention. He was tall, unnaturally so, his face blurred as if he'd moved during the exposure. But it wasn't the blur that made me pause, it was his hands. Even in the grainy photograph, I could see they were wrong, too long, the fingers tapering to points rather than blunt tips. I turned the photograph over. Someone had written on the back in faded ink, "Mill opening ceremony, left to right. J. Wainwright, T. Pearson, F. Holloway, G. Smith, and the stranger." The stranger. A chill ran through me as I studied the photograph again. Could this be the creature, or something connected to it? Had it once walked among the townsfolk, disguised but not quite human? I pocketed the photograph, intending to show it to Gerald and Ruth. As I was leaving, a noise from the main exhibition hall caught my attention, a soft thump, like something heavy being set down. I froze, listening. The building should have been empty. "Hello?" I called out, my hand moving to my gun. "Anyone there?" No response, just the quiet tick of the old grandfather clock in the corner. I moved cautiously toward the sound, gun drawn. The exhibition hall was dark, the displays of pioneer tools and Native American artifacts casting long shadows in the beam of my flashlight. Nothing seemed out of place until I noticed the back door, slightly ajar, a cool breeze rustling the papers on the curator's desk. I approached slowly, pushing the door open wider with my foot. Outside, the parking lot was empty save for my cruiser. But there, in the dirt, just beyond the door, were those familiar scratches. Deep, purposeful, leading away from the building toward the tree line. My heart pounded in my chest. It had been here, in town, watching me, following me. I slammed the door shut, locking it securely, then quickly checked the rest of the building. Nothing else was disturbed, nothing taken. It had come for me, or for what I was finding. It knew I was getting closer to something. Back at my apartment, I laid out everything I'd gathered: Wainwright's journal, the photograph, newspaper clippings of disappearances dating back a century, my own notes from witness interviews. Patterns emerged, connections I hadn't seen before. The creature's hunting cycles seemed to follow a rough 30-year pattern. Periods of intense activity followed by relative quiet. We were in an active phase now, the most aggressive in living memory. But why? What had changed? Was it getting bolder or desperate? I remembered what Gerald had said about the Watchers, the group that had tried to fight it in the 50s. If they had tracked it, studied it, they must have kept records of their own. The next morning, I visited Gerald again, asking about Earl Simmons and any notes he might have left behind. His daughter might know, Gerald suggested. Janice. Lives over in Millfield now, runs the pharmacy there. I made the hour-long drive to Millfield that afternoon, finding Janice Simmons at the small pharmacy on Main Street. She was wary at first, reluctant to discuss her father's obsession with that thing in the woods, as she called it. It ruined his life, she told me bitterly. Ruined our family. Mom left because of it. Said she couldn't compete with a ghost story. I'm sorry, I said sincerely, but I need to know if he left anything behind. Notes, recordings, anything that might help understand what we're dealing with. Janice sighed, her resistance crumbling. There's a box in my attic. Dad's things. I never could bring myself to throw them out even though I wanted to. You can look through it, if you think it'll help. The box was large, filled with journals, maps marked with tracking data, even plaster casts of footprints. Earl Simmons had been thorough, methodical in his pursuit of the truth. His journals detailed years of investigation, including interviews with survivors, people who had encountered the creature and lived to tell about it. Most described the same thing, a humanoid figure of impossible proportions, moving with unnatural speed, displaying intelligence beyond any animal. But it was one of the later entries that caught my attention. October 3rd, 1958. We found the cave today, deep in the northern woods, hidden behind a waterfall. The entrance was marked with symbols I've never seen before, old, carved into the stone. Inside, the walls were covered with paintings, ancient, showing the thing and people worshipping it, bringing it sacrifices. Webb thinks it's been here for thousands of years, that the native tribes knew about it, feared it, called it the hunger that walks. We're going back tomorrow with better equipment, try to document everything. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. There were no more entries after that. According to Gerald, Earl and the others had disappeared the next day. Their equipment was found at the cave entrance, but the men themselves were never seen again. A cave, symbols, ancient paintings. This was something new, something none of my other sources had mentioned. Could this be the creature's lair, its origin? I needed to find that cave, but the northern woods covered hundreds of square miles. Without more specific information, it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. But Earl had mentioned a waterfall. There weren't many in this part of North Dakota, especially ones large enough to conceal a cave entrance. I spread out a topographical map of the area, searching for any indication of significant water features. There, about 20 miles north of town, a small blue line indicating a stream, with a notation for a waterfall. It was in a remote area, rarely visited even by the most adventurous hikers. I knew I couldn't go alone. This time, I needed backup, people I could trust who wouldn't dismiss what we might find. Rivera was out of the question. He still clung to the bear attack theory, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. But there were others. Madeline had come around after Brianna's rescue, finally accepting that something unnatural was stalking our woods. And there was Rivera's deputy, Marcus Alvarez, who had grown up with local legends and seemed more open to possibilities beyond the ordinary. I approached them separately, sharing what I'd found, asking for their help. Both agreed, though Madeline made me promise we'd go in daylight, well-armed, and with clear escape routes planned. We set out early on a Saturday morning, telling Rivera we were following up on reports of poachers in the northern sector. The drive was tense, each of us lost in our own thoughts, aware of the danger we were voluntarily walking into. The hike to the waterfall took nearly 3 hours, the terrain growing steeper and more challenging as we approached. When we finally heard the rush of water ahead, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. The waterfall itself was modest, perhaps 30 feet high, cascading down a rocky cliff face into a clear pool below. At first glance, there was no sign of a cave or entrance of any kind. Maybe we're in the wrong place, Marcus suggested, scanning the area. Or maybe the cave collapsed over the years. Let's look around, I insisted. It has to be here somewhere. We spread out, searching the cliff face for any opening or unusual formation. It was Madeline who found it, a narrow fissure behind the curtain of water, almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Here, she called out, her voice nearly drowned by the rushing water. I think this is it. Marcus and I joined her, examining the opening. It was tight, but passable for a person to squeeze through sideways. And there, carved into the rock beside it, were the symbols Earl had mentioned, strange, angular glyphs that resembled no language I recognized. What do they mean? Marcus asked, tracing one with his finger. No idea, I admitted. But they're a warning. I'd bet my life on it. We hesitated at the entrance, each silently contemplating what might await us inside. Finally, I took a deep breath. I'll go first. If anything happens to me, get out. Don't try to be heroes. Not a chance, Madeline said firmly. We go together or not at all. I nodded, appreciating their loyalty even as I feared for their safety. We switched on our flashlights and one by one squeezed through the narrow opening into the unknown. The cave beyond was larger than I expected, the ceiling high enough that our lights couldn't quite reach it. The air was cold and damp, with that same sickly sweet odor I'd encountered before, the creature's scent. Our flashlight beams played across the walls, revealing what Earl had described. Ancient paintings, crude but unmistakable, showing a tall, elongated figure surrounded by human forms in postures of worship or supplication. Other scenes depicted the creature hunting, humans fleeing before it, or being offered to it by robed figures. My God, Madeline whispered. How old are these? Thousands of years, maybe, I replied, my voice echoing slightly in the cavern. The native tribes must have known about it, feared it. We moved deeper into the cave, the paintings growing more elaborate, more disturbing. Some showed the creature consuming its victims, absorbing something from them, their essence, their spirit, represented by wisps of color flowing from the humans into the creature. It's not just eating them, Marcus observed, his voice tight. It's feeding on something else. Their fear, maybe? The thought sent a chill through me. What if the creature wasn't just a predator in the conventional sense? What if it fed on emotions as much as flesh? The cave narrowed as we progressed, the ceiling dropping lower, forcing us to hunch over. The air grew heavier, the stench stronger. We were getting closer to something. The passage opened suddenly into another chamber, smaller than the first, but with a high domed ceiling. Unlike the outer cave, this room showed signs of recent use. Fresh scratches marked the walls and the floor was littered with bones. Animal and human, old and new. In the center of the chamber stood a crude altar of piled stones, stained dark with what could only be blood. And on the walls, more paintings, but these were different, not ancient, but recent, made with modern paint depicting modern scenes. The town of Wainwright, the logging road, the cabin, and us. 3 figures, recognizably Madeline, Marcus, and myself, standing at the cave entrance. It knew we were coming, I breathed, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. It's been watching us all along. We need to get out of here, Marcus urged, backing toward the passage. Now. But as we turned to leave, a low, rattling breath echoed through the chamber. The creature stood blocking the exit, its massive frame filling the narrow passage. In the confined space, it seemed even larger, more terrifying. Its skin glistened wetly in the beam of our flashlights, its eyes reflecting the light like a cat's. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, deliberately, it stepped into the chamber. The creature emerged from the shadows, its massive frame stepping into the moonlight. This time I could see it clearly. The beast stood on 2 legs, but its body was still hunched over, its limbs too long, fingers ending in claws that glistened with dark, congealed blood. It locked onto me, and I felt that gut-wrenching fear shoot through me. This was it. No turning back. With every ounce of adrenaline I had left, I ran. I darted through the trees, zigzagging as I went, praying I could lose it. Behind me, I could hear it crashing through the underbrush, its heavy footsteps thudding against the ground like a war drum. I burst through the clearing, spotting my cruiser in the distance. I could make it. A sudden pain shot through my ankle as I tripped over a root. I tumbled to the ground, gasping. The creature was almost upon me. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging as I threw myself into the car, fumbling with the keys. My hands shook violently, but I managed to get the engine roaring to life just as it reached me. I slammed the gas pedal, the tires screeching as I tore down the dirt road, glancing in the rearview mirror. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, but it didn't chase after me. It just watched, its massive form silhouetted against the moonlight, waiting for me to come back. The rest of that night was a blur. I called in the sheriff, but he dismissed my claims, chalking it up to a wild imagination. No one believed me, not even Madeline. I spent hours trying to convince them, to show them the evidence, but they brushed me off. Days turned into weeks. I felt the grip of paranoia tightening around me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I began to hear whispers among the townsfolk about the disappearances, the legends growing like weeds. They were convinced it was just an animal, just a story. Then one night I caught a break. Madeline got a call about another missing person, a local teen who'd been hiking alone. I bolted into action, determined to find her before it was too late. The sheriff finally relented, sending a small team with me to the last known location. As we hiked into the woods, I led the way, heart pounding with each step. But this time the air felt different, thick with tension, pregnant with dread. When we reached the clearing, I froze. The bodies were gone. All that remained were faint stains on the ground, evidence of what had happened. We searched for hours, calling out the teen's name, but there was no response. Just the quiet rustling of the forest. As we prepared to turn back, I caught sight of something. A flash of white through the trees. "Over there," I yelled, rushing toward it. The others followed, hearts pounding with hope. We stumbled into another clearing, and there she was, huddled against a tree, shaking and wide-eyed. I rushed over, kneeling beside her. "It's okay. You're safe now," I assured her, even though I wasn't so sure. But before I could get her out, the air shifted again. That same suffocating feeling returned, and we were surrounded. The creature emerged from the trees, dragging something behind it, a body. A primal scream tore through the night. It lunged at us, and I could feel the world closing in. I had to protect the girl. The sheriff shouted orders, but they were lost in the chaos as we scrambled for cover. The creature was faster, stronger, and it caught one of my colleagues before we could even react. The screams echoed through the trees, drowning out everything else. In that moment of pure adrenaline, I remembered the shovel I'd brought from the cruiser. I grabbed it from the ground where I'd dropped it earlier and raced toward the thing, my heart pounding in my ears. With every ounce of strength, I swung the shovel, catching the creature across its side. It let out a horrible screech, the sound reverberating in my bones. But it wasn't enough. It turned, swiping at me with a claw that felt like a freight train. I ducked just in time, feeling the wind from its swipe as it roared in fury. I realized then that this was my chance. I couldn't let fear stop me. I lunged again, the shovel connecting with its neck. The creature staggered, but I pressed on, adrenaline pushing me beyond my limits. With a final, desperate swing, I struck its head. It fell to the ground, motionless, the body crumpling in on itself. I stood there, panting, the girl staring at me wide-eyed. Then came the quiet. We'd done it. I looked around, catching the terrified expressions of my colleagues as they realized what had just happened. The proof of what had haunted our town lay before us. The aftermath was swift. The sheriff ordered a full investigation, though we knew there would be whispers about what we found. There would always be skeptics, always be those who doubted. But I didn't care. I had seen it with my own eyes, and the evidence was there for anyone willing to look. We retrieved the bodies of the victims, laying them to rest while the town struggled to come to terms with the horror lurking in the woods. Months passed, and as the seasons changed, so did the stories. New legends sprung up, but the truth remained hidden beneath the surface, a shadow just out of reach. I still patrol the streets of Wainwright, still answer calls, but a part of me will never forget what happened that night. I keep a close watch on the woods, knowing that sometimes the most terrifying things don't just stay in the dark, and sometimes they linger long after they've been confronted. The cave confrontation with the creature was the turning point. As it advanced on us, I realized we couldn't escape. We had to fight. With Madeline and Marcus backing me, we stood our ground, weapons raised. The creature paused, studying us with those intelligent eyes. It wasn't used to prey that didn't run, that faced it directly. For a moment I thought I saw uncertainty in its gaze. That's when I made my move. I lunged forward, driving my shovel into its chest with all my strength. The creature howled, a sound that shook dust from the cavern ceiling. It swiped at me, catching my shoulder, sending pain lancing through my arm. Marcus fired his weapon, the shots deafening in the confined space. The creature staggered backward, dark fluid seeping from multiple wounds, but it didn't fall. Madeline grabbed one of the flares from her pack, lit it, and hurled it at the beast. The searing light seemed to cause it more pain than the bullets, making it shriek and cover its eyes. "The light!" I shouted. "It hates the light!" We each lit flares, surrounding the creature with burning red light. It cowered, backing toward the wall, making that strange wheezing sound I'd heard before, almost like laughter but pained now, desperate. With the creature cornered, I approached cautiously, shovel raised for another strike. But before I could reach it, it did something unexpected. It spoke. The sound was garbled, distorted, like someone who hadn't used their voice in centuries trying to form words with a mouth not made for human speech. But the meaning was clear enough. You cannot end me. I froze, the shovel half raised. What are you? It made that laughing sound again. Older than your kind. I was here, first. Why? Why kill so many? I demanded, anger overriding my fear. To live, to feed. Your fear sustains. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. It fed on fear as much as flesh. The hunting, the killing, it was all to create terror, to feast on the emotions of its victims and the town. It ends now, I said firmly. No more hunting, no more killing. The creature tilted its head, a gesture almost human in its curiosity. You cannot kill what does not truly live. And then it moved, faster than anything that size should be able to move. It lunged not at us, but at the wall behind it, smashing through what appeared to be solid rock but was actually a thin barrier concealing another passage. Before we could react, it had vanished into the darkness beyond. We pursued cautiously, following the new tunnel as it sloped steeply downward, deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, the stench stronger. The passage opened into a vast cavern, larger than the first, its ceiling lost in darkness above. In the center stood a pool of black viscous liquid, bubbling slightly, though there was no apparent heat source. The creature had reached it, was dragging itself into the pool, its wounds seemingly forgotten. Stop, I shouted, rushing forward. But I was too late. The creature submerged itself in the black liquid, disappearing from view. The surface of the pool bubbled more violently, then stilled. Silence fell over the cavern, broken only by our ragged breathing. Is it gone? Madeline whispered, moving to stand beside me. I don't know, I admitted, staring at the now calm surface of the pool. What is this place? Marcus knelt at the edge, careful not to touch the liquid. Look at the rocks around it. They're carved. More symbols, but different from the ones at the entrance. He was right. The stones encircling the pool were etched with complex patterns, a script more refined than the crude pictographs in the outer cave. This was something older, more deliberate. We need to destroy it, I decided suddenly. This pool, whatever it is, it's the source, the creature's home, maybe even its origin. How do we destroy something like this? Madeline asked, gesturing at the pool. I thought of the flares, how the creature had reacted to the light. Fire, I said. We burn it. We gathered everything flammable we could find, our spare clothes, maps, the wooden handles of our tools. Marcus had a small can of lighter fluid he used for his camp stove. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to start. As we prepared our makeshift pyre, the pool began to bubble again, more violently than before. The liquid rose, forming a shape. Not the creature we had fought, but something larger, less defined. A mass of darkness that seemed to absorb the light from our flashlights. Hurry, I urged, as the darkness continued to rise, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape twice the size of the creature we'd encountered. We threw our bundle onto the surface of the pool and lit it. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flames caught, spreading across the surface of the liquid with surprising speed. The darkness shrieked, a sound that drove needles of pain into my skull. The cavern shook, rocks falling from the ceiling, splashing into the burning pool. Run! I shouted, grabbing Madeline and Marcus by the arms. The whole place is coming down. We fled back up the tunnel, the sounds of destruction echoing behind us. We barely made it out of the cave before the entrance collapsed, sending a cloud of dust billowing across the clearing. We stood there, coughing and stunned, watching as the ground over the cavern subsided, trees tilting at odd angles as the earth settled. Is it over? Madeline asked, her voice small in the aftermath. I stared at the collapsed entrance, the fallen trees, the disturbed earth. I don't know, I answered honestly, but we've heard it at least. Maybe enough to make a difference. We made our way back to town, exhausted and battered but alive. Rivera was waiting at the station, his face a mask of fury and concern. Where the hell have you been? He demanded. There's been an earthquake or something up north. Half the town felt it, And you three look like you've been through a war. I exchanged glances with Madeline and Marcus, a silent agreement passing between us. Some truths were too fantastic, too dangerous to share widely. Just checking out those reports of poachers, I said casually. Got caught in a rock slide when the tremors hit. Lucky to get out alive. Rivera didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes, but he didn't press the issue. Maybe he'd finally realized there were some questions better left unasked in Wainwright. In the weeks that followed, a strange peace settled over the town. The disappearances stopped. The feeling of being watched, of something lurking just beyond the tree line, faded. People began to relax, to venture into the woods again without fear. I kept my vigil, patrolling the forest edge each night, watching for any sign of the creature's return. But the woods remained quiet, ordinary. Had we killed it? Trapped it? Or merely wounded it? Sent it into hibernation to heal and return decades later, as it had done before? I didn't know, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. I became the keeper of Wainwright's darkest secret, the guardian against a threat most people preferred to forget or deny. Madeline and Marcus moved on eventually. Madeline to a dispatch position in a larger town, Marcus to the state police. But before they left, we made a pact. If it ever returned, if the signs appeared again, we would reunite, finish what we'd started. I stayed, unable to leave, unwilling to abandon my post. On quiet nights, I would drive up to the logging road, park near the collapsed cave entrance, and listen. Not just with my ears, but with that other sense the creature had awakened in me, the ability to feel when something unnatural was near. Most nights, there was nothing. Just the usual sounds of the forest, the wind in the trees, animals going about their business. But sometimes, when the moon was dark and the stars seemed distant, I thought I could hear something. A faint, wheezing breath, like laughter. A reminder that some things can never truly be destroyed, only contained, temporarily beaten back by the light. On those nights, I would return to town, check the locks on my doors and windows, and prepare. For I knew that, although we had won a battle, the war was far from over. The creature, or others like it, would return someday, drawn by our fear, our vulnerability. And when it did, I would be waiting. That's the story of what happened in Wainwright. Not the official version. Not the sanitized tale the county puts in its records. The truth, as I lived it, as I continue to live it every day. So if you're ever passing through our little town, pay attention to the locals' warnings. Stay out of the woods after dark. Don't go looking for the old logging road or the collapsed cave. Some secrets are best left buried, some stories best left untold. But if you hear something in the night, a sound like laughter that isn't quite human, don't run. It only makes the hunt more exciting for it. Stand your ground, face it directly. It's the fear it wants most of all, and remember this, not all monsters hide under the bed or in the closet. Some walk among us, wearing masks of normalcy, and some wait in the darkness of the woods, patient and hungry, for those foolish enough to venture where they don't belong. The first morning in my cabin, I watched dawn break over the vast Alaskan wilderness through a window rimmed with frost. Steam rose from my coffee as I contemplated how I'd ended up here, alone, in one of the most remote outposts in Denali National Park. The locals called this area Adoette's Hollow, after an ancient tribal legend. Now it was my responsibility, all 600 square miles of unforgiving terrain. My name is Koyuk Ashevak. I carried my grandmother's Inupiaq name, though I'd grown up far from these ancestral lands. Taking this ranger position felt like returning to something I'd lost, a connection severed generations ago when my family migrated south. The National Park Service had been desperate to fill this particular post. 3 rangers had quit in the past 18 months. The pay was good, the solitude appealing, and something in the job listing's warning about challenging conditions had drawn me like a moth to flame. It's not the conditions that drive them away, my supervisor Randall had said during my orientation, his weathered face unreadable. It's the sounds, the tracks, the feeling of being watched. He'd quickly changed the subject, handing me maps of disappearances going back 50 years. My cabin sat beside Lake Tai Yi, a mirror-smooth body of water cradled between towering pines and jagged mountains. The isolation was absolute. The nearest ranger station was 70 miles west, and the closest town twice that distance. My radio worked sporadically. Cell service was a distant memory. 3 days into my posting, I received my first emergency call. A hiker had gone missing from a group campsite 12 miles northeast of my position. I packed my gear methodically: first aid kit, GPS, emergency rations, flares, rifle. Standard procedure, though Randall's parting words echoed. If you're out after dark, don't stop moving, no matter what you hear. The forest welcomed me with a green cathedral of silence. Old-growth cedars and hemlocks created a canopy that strangled the sunlight. My boots crunched through undergrowth as I followed the trail toward the campsite, alert for any signs of the missing hiker. 5 hours in, I found the first abnormality: a hiking boot, abandoned in a small clearing, no signs of struggle. I photographed it, bagged it, and continued on, unease growing as shadows lengthened across my path. The campsite was abandoned when I arrived. 4 tents stood in military precision, but no humans remained. Backpacks leaned against trees, a pot of beans sat on the cold fire pit, and a half-written journal entry lay open on a camp chair. Something's been circling the camp since dawn. Ryan says it's nothing but... The writing stopped mid-sentence. I keyed my radio, reporting the situation, but only static answered. Methodically, I documented the scene, fighting the growing sense that I was being observed. The forest had fallen unnaturally silent. As daylight waned, I made the decision to establish a base at the campsite. Protocol demanded I continue searching, but darkness in these woods was absolute, and something about the abandoned camp suggested a hasty departure rather than violence. I secured the perimeter, built a fire, and prepared for a night of vigilance. The sounds began precisely at 10:17 p.m. Wood knocking, 3 sharp cracks that echoed from the northwest, then again closer, from the east. Traditional knowledge suggested bears sometimes knocked on trees, but the pattern felt deliberate, communicative. I gripped my rifle tighter, scanning the darkness beyond my firelight. At midnight, I heard the first vocalization. Not quite human, not quite animal. A long, wavering call that raised every hair on my body. It came from the ridge above the campsite, perhaps half a mile distant. Minutes later, an answering call echoed from the opposite direction. Whatever made those sounds, there were at least 2. The forest floor vibrated with heavy, deliberate footsteps circling the perimeter of my camp. Something large was pacing just beyond the firelight. I called out official warnings, identifying myself as a park ranger, but the footsteps continued their methodical circuit. At 2:36 a.m., I found the first track. A bare footprint pressed deep into the soil at the camp's edge. 18 inches long, humanoid but with splayed toes and unusual arch structure. I photographed it beside my boot for scale, noting the clear dermal ridges, fingerprints essentially, visible in the impression. Whatever left this track had skin, not fur on its feet. Dawn brought relief and new horrors. The campsite remained undisturbed, but surrounding it, pressed into the soft earth, dozens of the same massive footprints formed a perfect circle around my position. More disturbing were the claw marks on trees at heights of 9 to 10 feet, deep gouges in the bark that hadn't been there the previous evening. I followed the freshest tracks north, up the ridge where I'd heard the first calls. The forest grew denser, the underbrush showing signs of recent disturbance, broken branches and compressed vegetation indicating the passage of something substantial. The air grew thick with an unmistakable musky odor, similar to wet dog but with undertones of something putrid. 2 miles from camp I found where they had gathered. A small clearing had been trampled flat, the ground covered in those same massive footprints. At the center lay a pile of bones, deer mostly, but a chill ran through me when I spotted what appeared to be a human femur. As I knelt to examine the remains, a thunderous roar shattered the morning stillness. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Primal, territorial, furious. It came from barely 100 yards through the trees. And then I saw it. Partially obscured by foliage but unmistakably there. A massive silhouette, at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair. It stood upright on 2 legs, swaying slightly as it watched me. Though its face remained in shadow, I felt its gaze boring into me with terrifying intelligence. I raised my hands slowly, non-threateningly, and began backing away. The creature matched my movements, stepping sideways through the trees, keeping pace. My training dissolved as primal fear took hold. I turned and ran, abandoning protocol and equipment in my desperation to escape. The thing followed, its powerful strides easily keeping pace through the underbrush. I crashed through the forest, lungs burning, the heavy footfalls behind me growing closer with each second. Just as I felt hot breath on my neck, the pursuit stopped abruptly. I risked a glance back and saw why. I'd crossed an invisible boundary. The creature stood at the forest's edge, massive chest heaving, watching me with unmistakable calculation. It raised one enormous hand, almost like a farewell, then melted back into the shadows. That night, barricaded in my cabin with every light blazing, I filed my report. The official language was clinical, detached, multiple missing persons, unknown animal signs, investigation ongoing. What I couldn't include was the look in that creature's eyes, the recognition, the intelligence, the ancient hatred I saw there. As darkness claimed the wilderness outside my windows, the wood knocking began again. Closer now. They had followed me home. Weeks passed at Lake Taiyi. The official search for the missing hikers yielded nothing beyond what I'd already discovered. My detailed reports of tracks and vocalizations were filed away with minimal comment. When I pressed about similar incidents, Randall's response was telling, "We don't discuss the hollow incidents outside secure channels." I threw myself into researching previous disappearances in the region. Patterns emerged. They occurred in cycles, approximately every 7 years, always during the summer months. Local tribal elders refused to discuss the area, calling it simply the forbidden hunting ground. One night, after too many drinks at the supply depot 90 miles south, an older ranger named Jenkins whispered across the table, "They've been here longer than us. This was never our land." The creatures maintained their distance but never truly left. Night after night, wood knocks echoed across the lake. Strange eyes reflected my flashlight beams from the tree line. Massive footprints appeared on the shoreline each morning, sometimes leading right up to my cabin before turning away. I began leaving peace offerings, strings of dried fish and small bundles of tobacco, at the forest edge. The morning after my first offering, I found the tobacco gone, replaced with a perfectly symmetrical arrangement of polished stones. Communication had begun. With early August came the next emergency call. A family of 4 had gone off trail near Broken Fang Ridge, 15 miles from my station. Their last communication mentioned strange structures in the trees that looked man-made, but impossibly high up. I gathered my equipment, including my personal camera with telephoto lens, determined to document whatever waited in those woods. The hike to their last known coordinates took me through increasingly untamed terrain. The forest floor was carpeted with a thick layer of moss that muffled my footsteps and seemed to absorb all sound. At times, I caught glimpses of movement at my periphery, dark shapes that vanished when directly observed. 6 hours in, I discovered the family's camp. Unlike the previous site, this one showed clear signs of panic. A tent torn open from the outside, supplies scattered in a direct line indicating flight. Blood spattered a nearby boulder, not pools but smears, as if someone bleeding had been dragged across it. Most disturbing were the tree structures. 20 feet up, between 3 massive pines, something, had woven branches, bark, and vegetation into an elaborate platform. Similar structures dotted the surrounding forest, connected by what appeared to be primitive bridges of twisted vines. These weren't human constructions. No climber could have created such elaborate aerial pathways without equipment, which was nowhere to be seen. I followed the drag marks into the forest, weapon ready. The trail led uphill toward a rock formation that rose like a broken tooth from the forest floor. At its base, a dark opening gaped, a cave entrance partially concealed by hanging lichen. Every instinct screamed danger, but duty propelled me forward. The cave mouth exhaled cool, damp air that carried that same musky odor, now overwhelming. I activated my flashlight and entered, calling out official identification and offers of help. The tunnel descended steeply, opening into a larger chamber after about 40 feet. My light beam caught reflective surfaces, eyes, dozens of them, lining the walls. I stifled a scream when I realized they were animal eyes, wolves, bears, moose, arranged in deliberate patterns on the rock face. Beneath them, carefully stacked bones formed what appeared to be a throne-like structure. On the far wall, something glistened. I approached cautiously, playing my light across what revealed itself to be a pictographic history painted in a mixture of ochre, charcoal, and what smelled disturbingly like blood. The images told a story spanning centuries: tribal humans hunting alongside massive bipedal creatures, European explorers being torn apart by the same beings, modern humans fleeing as the creatures reclaimed territories. The final image froze my blood. A crude but recognizable rendering of my cabin, with a single human figure inside, my figure, watching, waiting. A low growl from the tunnel entrance spun me around. Massive shoulders blocked the exit, the creature's breath visible in the cool cave air. This close, I could see details my mind struggled to process. Opposable thumbs ending in 4-inch claws, a sloped forehead above deep-set eyes that reflected red in my flashlight beam, teeth too numerous and sharp for any known primate. We stood in silent confrontation for what felt like eternity. Then, slowly, deliberately, it stepped aside, clearing the exit path. The message was unmistakable. I was being permitted to leave. I edged past, keeping my light trained on the creature. It smelled of earth and blood and something ancient. Outside, the forest had darkened to twilight. I noted with horror that I wasn't alone. Dark shapes moved between the trees, at least a dozen massive figures observing my exit from the cave. One approached, larger than the others, its silver-shot fur suggesting great age. It carried something in its enormous hands, a child's backpack, brightly colored and torn. With deliberate movements, it placed the backpack at my feet, then retreated 3 paces. Understanding bloomed cold in my chest. This was negotiation. They were showing me they had the missing family. The question was, what did they want in exchange? I removed my Park Service badge, the symbol of federal authority, and placed it on the ground. The silver-backed creature considered this, then made a sound unlike anything I'd heard, almost a laugh, rumbling and wet. It gestured toward my map case. With trembling hands, I unfolded my topographical map. The creature extended one massive finger and pressed it deliberately on the location of the primary ranger station, 70 miles west. Then, with surprising dexterity, it drew a line around an area of approximately 200 square miles, including my cabin and Lake Tyee, the territory they considered theirs. The boundary I shouldn't cross, the land they wanted officially abandoned. I nodded slowly, understanding. The creature responded by dropping something else beside the backpack, a child's shoe with the foot still inside. The threat couldn't have been clearer. I backed away, maintaining eye contact with the silverback. The creatures parted, creating a path for my departure, but they followed at a distance as I navigated back through darkening forest. Their escort continued precisely to the invisible boundary the silverback had identified, the perimeter of what they considered their exclusive territory. That night, I coded an emergency message to headquarters, requesting immediate extraction for a safety consultation. What I couldn't say on open channels was that I'd glimpsed something humans weren't meant to see, evidence that we'd been sharing these lands with another intelligent species, one that had tolerated our presence until we pushed too far into their remaining territory. As I packed essential supplies, heavy footsteps circled my cabin. Occasionally, something massive scraped against the walls, a reminder of my vulnerability. Through the window, I could see their silhouettes against the moonlit lake, watching, waiting to see what decision I would make. In the distance, I heard screaming, human voices begging for help across the water. The family, I presumed, being used to test whether I would honor the boundary. I closed my eyes, fighting every instinct to help, knowing it was a test I would fail at the cost of more lives. Their screams continued through the night, eventually fading to whimpers, then silence. Dawn broke with the sound of approaching helicopter rotors. As I stepped outside, bag in hand, I found a final message on my porch. 4 severed human fingers arranged in a straight line pointing west, away from the territory. The meaning was unmistakable. I boarded the helicopter without looking back, but as we rose above the tree line, I saw them, dozens of massive figures emerging from the forest edge to watch our departure. The largest raised a hand, not in farewell, but in warning. That night, in the safety of headquarters, I filed my resignation. 5 months passed, Winter claimed the Alaskan wilderness, and I tried to rebuild my life in Anchorage, taking a desk position with the Forest Service. The nightmares never stopped. Massive shapes moving through trees, cave walls lined with eyes, fingers arranged in silent warning. During daylight hours, I researched obsessively. Tribal legends, historical disappearances, scientific papers on unclassified primates. I learned that what I'd encountered had names across multiple cultures: Sasquatch, Wendigo, Tornit. The Inupiaq called them Arulatak, the ones who walk behind. Government records revealed a pattern of abandoned ranger stations and redrawn boundaries throughout the region's history, always preceded by disappearances. Most telling was what I found in sealed Forest Service archives, a 1978 memorandum authorizing specialized containment zones in remote areas, places where human presence would be deliberately minimized. Lake Tyee and the surrounding 200 square miles appeared on that list. We'd known all along. We'd been maintaining the boundaries for generations. In February, Randall called. "They found your replacement in the spring thaw," he said without preamble. "What was left of him? The higher-ups are considering a permanent evacuation of Sector 7. They need your testimony." I returned to headquarters the following week. The meeting included Park Service directors, Department of Interior officials, and two men who never identified their agency affiliations. I told them everything: the tracks, the structures, the cave paintings, the territorial negotiation. I emphasized the intelligence I'd witnessed, the clear communication, the deliberate warnings. "They're not animals," I concluded. "They're people. A different kind of people, but people nonetheless. They've been managing us as much as we've been managing them." The decision came 3 days later. Sector 7 would be officially designated a wildlife conservation zone, closed to all human traffic. My final assignment would be placing warning markers at strategic boundary points, simple red reflectors mounted on trees, meaningless to casual observers, but very clear to those who needed to understand. April found me back at Lake Tyee, accompanied by a 4-person security team. My cabin had been destroyed, not by weather, but by deliberate force. Walls torn outward, roof beams snapped and arranged in cross patterns. A warning. We worked efficiently, placing markers along jeep trails and footpaths, creating GPS boundaries on official maps. The security team maintained constant vigilance, jumpy and trigger-happy. They'd been briefed, but hadn't seen what I had. They still believed bullets would save them if boundaries were crossed. On our final night, camped at the lake's edge, the wood knocking began at sunset. 3 sharp cracks from the north, answered by 3 from the south, then east, then west. We were surrounded. "Just territorial displays," the security lead assured his nervous team. "Fire will keep them back." I knew better. The creatures had allowed our presence for a purpose, to ensure we marked their territory correctly, to witness our acknowledgement of their sovereignty. The boundary markers weren't for random hikers. They were our signal of compliance with their terms. At midnight, a massive figure emerged from the tree line, the silver-backed leader I'd encountered in the cave. It approached our camp with deliberate steps, ignoring the raised weapons of the security team. In its hands, it carried something wrapped in leaves. "Hold fire," I ordered, stepping forward. "This is negotiation." The creature stopped 10 feet from our fire. With ceremonial slowness, it unwrapped the leaf bundle, revealing a human skull, not ancient but recent, flesh still clinging to bone in places. My replacement ranger, I presumed. The creature placed it precisely at the boundary line we'd established. I understood immediately, confirmation that trespassers would meet the same fate. But there was something else in the gesture, a formality that suggested diplomatic exchange rather than mere threat. From my pack, I removed what I'd brought as my own offering. Detailed maps showing the newly established conservation zone. The area is now officially forbidden to humans. I placed them on the ground between us. The silverback studied the maps with obvious comprehension, massive finger tracing the boundary lines we'd created. After long consideration, it looked directly at me and made a gesture I recognized from the cave. One hand sweeping forward, palm down, then back toward its chest. Their sign for agreement. What happened next shattered the security team's composure. From the darkness behind the silverback, dozens of creatures emerged. Males, females, juveniles of varying sizes. They formed a semicircle behind their leader, watching our camp with unblinking attention. The security team's weapons swiveled frantically, but I raised my hand. Don't fire. This is a formal witnessing. They're acknowledging the treaty. The silverback made a final gesture, pointing directly at me, then touching its own chest, then sweeping its arm to encompass its family group. Recognition, respect, warning. Then, with synchronized movement that suggested frequent group coordination, they melted back into the forest darkness, leaving only the skull as evidence of their visit. We departed at first light, the security team uncharacteristically silent. At the helicopter, I made my decision, watching as they loaded equipment. When the pilot turned to beckon me aboard, I shook my head. I'm staying, I announced. Someone needs to monitor the boundary, someone they recognize. Arguments ensued, threats of disciplinary action, concerns for my safety. I stood firm. I speak their language now. I'm the only one who can ensure both sides honor the agreement. In truth, I had glimpsed something in that cave that haunted me more than any threat. The pictographs showing humans and creatures hunting together, cooperating in ancient times. Before fear divided us, before boundaries became necessary, those images suggested possibility, that coexistence had happened once and might again with proper understanding. The helicopter departed, leaving me alone at the boundary line. That night, wood knocks echoed across the lake, 3 sharp cracks that I now recognized as questions. For the first time, I answered, using 2 rocks to crack out my own 3-beat response. Silence followed, then a single knock from much closer. I responded with one of my own. From the darkness beyond my fire, the silverback emerged, this time alone. It studied me with eyes that reflected ancient knowledge, then deliberately sat across the flames, a posture that mirrored my own. Communication had truly begun, not as ranger and beast, but as representatives of 2 intelligent species sharing contested land. I had become something unprecedented, an ambassador to the shadows that had always walked these forests alongside us, watching, waiting for humans wise enough to recognize them as equals rather than legends. As fire crackled between us, I realized the true reason I'd been drawn to this remote post, why I'd returned despite the danger. These creatures weren't monsters from horror stories. They were the original guardians of these lands, with their own society, their own rules, their own right to existence. The silverback extended one massive hand, palm up, across the fire. A gesture impossible to misinterpret, an invitation to shake, to seal our understanding. I reached out and took it, my hand disappearing in its enormous grip. The creature's skin was warm, calloused, undeniably real. In that moment, I became the threshold between worlds. The first human in generations to acknowledge what had always lived beyond the firelight of our understanding. Not a monster hunter, but a translator between species that had forgotten how to coexist. Wood knocks echoed through the forest, dozens of them, a communication network spreading news of our pact into the wilderness. The treaty line would hold, but something more important had been established. Recognition. Respect. The first trembling step toward reconciliation. I had come to the wilderness searching for connection to lost ancestral knowledge. In the eyes of what others called monsters, I had found it. The true history of humanity has always included chapters written in the shadows, tales of other intelligences walking alongside our own. At Lake Taiyi, I had finally learned to read them.